You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is The Estate I Inherited Came with Instructions for the Basement Trapdoor. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. I shouldn't have gone down there alone. The note taped to the basement door said wait for 2 people, underlined twice in my uncle's cramped handwriting. And I stood there with my phone flashlight pointed at it, while something on the other side made a soft, patient scraping sound. My name is Daniel Mercer, 32, male, born in Pittsburgh, and recently divorced enough that I still said we when I meant I. I had inherited the house from my mother's older brother, Frank Mercer, who died in late October after slipping on the back steps and hitting his head on the stone edging he'd installed himself. He was 71, stubborn, and the sort of man who labeled every breaker switch, every jar of screws, every shelf in the pantry like he expected civilization to collapse, and wanted the survivors to know where the drywall anchors were. The estate sat outside Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, tucked off Route 6 where the road narrowed, and the pines pressed in close enough to flick needles against the car windows. It wasn't a mansion, despite what everyone kept calling it. It was a big old farmhouse with pretensions. 3 floors, a wraparound porch, a carriage shed, a sagging greenhouse, and a basement door in the kitchen, painted the same cream color as the cabinets, as if someone had tried to make it disappear by matching it to the room. I found the first instruction before I found the coffee mugs. It was Wednesday morning, gray and wet, the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as hang in the air and make everything smell like wet bark and cold stone. I had driven up with my cousin and a realtor to make an inventory. That was the official reason. The real reason was that I wanted to see whether I could sell the place fast enough to pay off the last joint credit card my ex-wife, and I still hadn't untangled. Mara Mercer, 29, female, my cousin, worked as an ER nurse in Harrisburg and had the practical calm of someone who had seen grown men cry over fishing hooks in thumbs. She came in through the mudroom carrying a cardboard tray of diner coffee and said, "Tell me there's heat." "There's heat," I said. "Is that true?" "No." She set the tray down beside a stack of yellowing mail. "Great. Lying already. Very healthy grieving behavior." "I'm not grieving. I'm evaluating assets." "You always sound most broken when you use finance words." Before I could answer, Elise Porter, 46, female, the realtor, stepped in behind her, shaking rain from a navy umbrella. Elise was local, polished in a way that made the house look even more neglected around her. She had silver blonde hair twisted into a clip, rubber boots under expensive slacks, and a smile that kept trying to reassure the room. "I'll call the oil company again," she said. Frank was usually very regular with deliveries. Frank was regular with everything, Mara said, looking at the little labels on the mudroom hooks. Winter COATS, summer COATS, guest rain gear, dog LEASHES, despite there being no dog. This place is like being trapped inside an instruction manual. That was when the kitchen light flickered. Not out, not dramatically. Just a weak flutter, like the bulb had blinked. From somewhere below us came a dull, metallic clack. Elise stopped halfway through removing her gloves. Mara looked at me. I looked at the basement door. The note was taped at eye level. Basement access, wait for 2 people. Do not prop the door open. Do not force the trapdoor if resistance is felt. Record time opened and time closed. If floor drain is dry, leave immediately and call N below that in smaller letters. Spare ledger in blue cabinet. Mara leaned closer. Call N. Elise, I said. Who's N? The realtor's smile thinned. Frank had a neighbor named Nora Bell. She checked in on him sometimes. Why would we call a neighbor because a floor drain is dry? Mara asked. Elise gave a small laugh that didn't land. Old houses have odd routines. Moisture issues, radon, sump pumps. People develop systems. I wanted that to be enough. I wanted to nod, make a joke about Frank being Frank, and move on to counting antique lamps. That was my flaw, I guess, though I didn't call it that then. I was very good at making strange things ordinary if ordinary would save me paperwork, money, or an uncomfortable conversation. The scraping came again, not loud, like a shovel being dragged an inch across concrete. Mara's hand moved to the strap of her bag. Daniel, it's probably the furnace. There's no heat. The sump pump then. Elise said, we don't actually need to go down today. That bothered me more than the sound did. Why not? She looked toward the hallway, toward the front of the house, where rain ticked steadily against the tall windows. Basements can be unsafe after long vacancies. Mold, loose steps, animals. Animals that read instructions, Mara snorted, but softly. I pulled the tape loose from one corner of the note. The paper was old, not ancient, but it had been handled enough that the edges were soft. Behind it, the paint on the door was a slightly different shade, a clean rectangle in the kitchen grime. The note had been there a long time. Mara said, we should call Nora. We just got here, and already the house is making basement noises under a warning label. Elise checked her phone. I don't have service inside. Sometimes you get a bar by the porch. I had 1 bar, then none. The Wi-Fi router in the front room was unplugged, its cords coiled neatly beside it with another label, canceled 9/14. Frank had lived alone for years, but the house didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like he had stepped out to get something and expected to come back before the soup boiled over. We found the blue cabinet in the laundry alcove off the kitchen. Inside were light bulbs, mouse traps, a flashlight with leaking batteries, and a black composition book labeled Basement Ledger Current. Mara opened it on the washer lid. The entries were ordinary at first glance. Oct 1, opened 8, 10 a.m. closed 8, 16 a.m. drain wet. No odor. Oct 4, opened 6, 35 p.m. closed 6, 41 p.m. drain wet. Hinge checked. Oct 7, opened 7:00 a.m. closed 7:04 a.m. drain wet. Heard pipe knock. Then the wording changed. Oct 13, open 9:22 p.m. closed 9:31 p.m. drain wet. Do not answer from below. Oct 16, opened 5:55 a.m. closed 6:03 a.m. drain wet. Trapdoor shifted half inch. Add weight. Oct 19, opened with Nora. 2:15 p.m. closed 2:28 p.m. drain wet. Nora says call county if repeats. Mara stopped reading aloud. Rain tapped the glass over the sink. Somewhere in the wall, a pipe gave a tiny click as if cooling. Elise said, Frank was declining near the end. I knew what she meant, and I didn't like how quickly I wanted to accept it. Memory issues, paranoia. a lonely old man making rituals because the world had shrunk to this kitchen, this door, this ledger. But Frank's handwriting was steady. The columns were straight. The dates made sense. I turned the page. The final entry had been written 3 days before he died. Oct 24, opened 11:48 p.m., closed 12:02 a.m. Drain dry. Did not call and thought I heard Rose. Mistake. Rose was my mother. She had been dead 6 years. Mara read the name over my shoulder and went still. Daniel, she said, quieter now. Why would he write that? I closed the book because I didn't want to see it anymore. Because Elise is right. He was old. He was alone. Mara looked at the basement door. He was careful. That landed. Because Frank had been careful. Annoyingly careful. He rotated canned goods. He wore eye protection to trim hedges. He once mailed me a tire pressure gauge because I had mentioned driving on underinflated tires during Thanksgiving dinner. Man like that didn't ignore his own instruction to call the neighbor unless something had knocked him off balance inside his own head, or unless something had convinced him not to. A truck passed on the road outside, tires hissing through wet pavement. The sound faded, and for a few seconds, the house settled into small noises. Refrigerator hum, rainwater in gutters, Mara's coffee, lid clicking under her thumb. Then my phone buzzed. One bar had returned long enough for a voicemail notification to come through. Unknown number. Received at 7:12 that morning while I was still on the highway. I played it on speaker. At first, there was only static and wind. Then an older woman's voice said, "Mr. Mercer, this is Nora Bell. I saw your car was due in today. Don't open the basement door until I get there. I don't care what the paper says." Frank changed the paper after Rose. "Wait for me." A pause. Then, farther from the phone, muffled but distinct, came 3 knocks. Not from Nora's side of the call. They sounded hollow. "Wooden." Nora said, "No, not now." The message ended. No one spoke. Elise swallowed. Mara reached for her own phone, but she still had no service. I replayed the voicemail because that's what people do when they don't want to make a decision. They make the machine say the impossible thing twice. The knocks came again, 3 of them. This time not from the phone, from below the kitchen floor. Elise stepped back hard enough to bump the counter. Mara grabbed the ledger. I looked at the basement door, at the instruction taped crookedly to the cream paint, at the old brass knob with scratches around the keyhole. Then the scraping resumed. Slow, measured, close. Mara said, "We leave right now. We go outside, get service, call Nora, call whoever." "And tell them what?" I said. "My dead uncle's basement knocked. Tell them the truth without making it poetic." Elise had already moved toward the mudroom. "I agree. We should step outside." But I didn't move. Because under the scraping, under the rain and the refrigerator hum, I thought I heard something else. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the shape of one through wood and concrete. A low sound rising and falling with the rhythm of someone trying not to cry. Mara heard it too. Her face changed. She whispered, "Is someone down there?" That was the choice. Not whether to believe in ghosts or curses or any of the stupid stories people tell when houses get old and families get quiet. The choice was uglier and more ordinary than that. If there was a person under the basement floor, we could not walk away. And if there wasn't, opening the door meant admitting Frank's instructions had been written for something real enough to scare a careful man into making a ledger. I picked up the flashlight from the blue cabinet. Mara said, "Daniel, don't." "I'm not opening the trapdoor," I said, though I could hear how thin that promise was. "Just the basement door. look from the stairs. 2 people right. Elise shook her head. Nora said, wait. From below came 3 more knocks. Then a faint, dragging breath. Mara cursed under her breath, stepped beside me, and took the ledger in both hands like it was a medical chart and a weapon. Fine, she said, but we do exactly what the note says. Door not propped, time recorded. 1 look. I wrote the time on the next blank line. Nav 6, opened 10:43 a.m. My hand made the numbers uglier than Frank's, and I turned the knob. The basement stairs were narrower than I expected. That was the first thing I noticed after opening the door. Not the smell, not the dark, the stairs. Old stone houses usually had broad cellar steps worn smooth in the middle, but these were steep and cramped, boxed in by rough concrete walls that narrowed the farther down they went. My flashlight beam barely reached the bottom. There was a turn halfway down where the light vanished into blackness. Cold air drifted up against my face, carrying damp mineral smells, rust, and something sour underneath, faint but unmistakable. Rotting leaves, maybe. Standing water. Behind me, Mara read from the ledger. 10:43 opened, she muttered. If this becomes a murder documentary later, I want it noted that I objected repeatedly. You object to everything repeatedly. Correct. Her voice helped. It made the situation feel less insane. Lise stood near the kitchen island, gripping her umbrella with both hands like she had forgotten she was indoors. Can you see anyone? No. The scraping had stopped the moment I opened the door. That bothered me more than if it had continued. I stepped onto the first stair. The wood groaned sharply under my weight. Old but solid. Dust floated through the flashlight beam in tiny silver flecks. Mara immediately said, "Don't go farther than the landing." I'm not. You are already lying. I ignored her because she was right. The second I leaned forward, trying to angle the flashlight around the bend, I heard it again. Breathing, low, wet, human, not below me exactly. Off to the left, I froze. Mara heard it too because her voice dropped. Hello, nothing answered. Then came a soft metallic tap. Tap, tap, like someone touching metal against concrete. Elise, Mara said without taking her eyes off the stairs. Call 911. No service, Elise whispered. Go outside and call. Elise hesitated. That hesitation sat wrong with me immediately. She should have moved. Any normal person would have rushed outside the second breathing noises started coming from a stranger-filled basement. Instead, she stood there staring at the dark opening like she recognized it. Elise, I said, I'm going. Too fast. Defensive already. She backed toward the mudroom. The front door slammed a second later under the wind. Rain hissed outside. Mara exhaled slowly. Okay. Great. We're handling this horribly. I took another step downward. The flashlight beam found the landing, concrete floor, old shelving, stacked paint cans, and a red toolbox collapsed open on its side. Beyond that was the rest of the basement, mostly hidden behind the turn in the stairs. Hello, I called. If someone's down there, we're calling for help. Silence. Then, faintly, don't. The voice was male, hoarse. Mara stared at me. You heard that? Yeah. Okay, great. Even better. The breathing turned into a cough. Violent, choking. I stopped thinking after that. I went down the remaining stairs too fast, Mara cursing and following immediately behind me because she knew better than to let me go alone now. The basement opened up suddenly at the bottom into a wide concrete room lined with old pipes and support beams blackened with age. The flashlight shook in my hand. There was no one there. No movement, no figure, just shelves of canned food, old tools, cloudy mason jars, and a furnace unit the size of a truck engine crouched in one corner. Water dripped steadily somewhere. Plink, plink. The sound echoed through the room with weird clarity. Mara came down beside me, breathing hard. Where is he? I don't know. But the room wasn't empty. In the center of the basement floor sat a square metal hatch about 4 feet across. Thick steel, industrial looking. A recessed handle lay flat against it. Fresh scrape marks scarred the concrete around the edges. The trapdoor. A chain had been bolted across it from one side to the other, secured with a heavy padlock. And beside the hatch sat a folding chair, empty. The chair faced the trapdoor directly. Mara whispered, Jesus. The room smelled stronger down there. Wet concrete, mildew, and something chemical underneath. Bleach maybe. My flashlight drifted toward the floor drain near the furnace. Dry, completely dry. Every hair on my arms lifted at once. Mara saw it too, Daniel. I backed away from the drain instinctively, though I couldn't have explained why. Then the coughing started again. Not from the room, from underneath us. 3 feet below the steel hatch, a man gasping for air. Mara reacted first. Holy shit. She dropped to one knee beside the trapdoor. Hello, can you hear me? A pause. Then a ragged voice answered through the metal. Water, not supernatural, not ghosts. A real person. My stomach turned over hard. I grabbed the chain. The padlock was thick and rusted, but newer than everything else down there. Help me with this. Mara didn't move. What? Wait. Her nurse voice had appeared calm, clipped, controlled. Think, there's someone trapped down there. Or someone hiding down there. He asked for water. That doesn't make him safe. The voice below coughed again, weaker this time. I looked around for tools, bolt cutters, anything. Instead, my light landed on another note taped to a support beam. If someone speaks from below before NARRIVES, do not open the hatch. Call County Sheriff first. Underneath, written later in darker ink, they will lie. Mara read it over my shoulder. We both went quiet. The coughing continued below us. Slow, uneven. Daniel, Mara said carefully, we don't know what this is. We know there's a person trapped under a steel door. We know there's a voice. That's enough. It should not be enough for you. That hit harder than she intended, because she was talking about Claire too, my ex-wife, about every stupid, impulsive thing I'd done during the collapse of our marriage. The loans, the failed business idea, the promises I made before thinking them through. I had spent 2 years trying to prove I wasn't selfish, and somehow all I'd managed to prove was that I confused panic with responsibility. The coughing stopped. The silence afterward felt enormous. Mara pressed her palm against the cold steel hatch. Hello. Nothing. And faintly, a scraping sound moved beneath us. Not random, purposeful, like someone dragging themselves across concrete. I found myself staring at the scrape marks around the hatch again. Fresh marks, recent. This thing had been opened lately. Frank kept someone down there, I said before I could stop myself. Mara shot me a look. Don't jump there. What else am I looking at? A shelter, storage. Somebody hiding after Frank died. Then why chain it shut? She didn't answer. Above us, the house groaned softly in the wind. Then footsteps crossed the kitchen overhead. All 3 of us froze. Elise, Mara called. No response. The footsteps continued slowly across the ceiling toward the back of the house. My chest tightened. She should have been outside calling already. Mara stood. Stay here. No, we are not splitting up with basement prisoners involved. Another footstep overhead. heavy this time, not heels, boots. Then came the sound of a door upstairs opening. Mara whispered, "There's somebody in the house." The voice under the hatch suddenly spoke again. "Urgent now. Don't let him." A loud bang cut him off from below, metal striking metal. Mara stumbled backward. Another bang hit the underside of the hatch hard enough to rattle the chain. "Jesus Christ," a man screamed below us. Not rage, pain. Then another voice erupted underneath, muffled but unmistakably different. Lower, sharper, "Shut up." Every muscle in my body locked. There were at least 2 people under there, one crying, one threatening. The hatch trembled again. Mara grabbed my arm. "We're leaving." But before we could move, the basement lights came on, not flickering, bright and sudden. We both flinched hard. At the top of the stairs stood a man in a dark green rain jacket, holding a revolver pointed loosely downward. He was in his 60s maybe. Lean, weathered face, gray beard wet from rain. Nora Bell stood behind him, gripping the railing with one hand, breathing hard from hurrying. "Don't move," the man said calmly. Mara raised both hands instantly. "Okay." I felt stupid for still holding the flashlight like it mattered. Nora looked furious more than frightened. "I told you to wait. You knew people were trapped down here," I snapped. "People." The older man's eyes narrowed. "How many voices did you hear?" Before I could answer, the hatch boomed again from underneath. The chain strained loudly. The older man descended the stairs without lowering the revolver. "Back away from it," he ordered. "Who are you?" Mara demanded. "Deputy Harold Vane, retired." His voice carried the automatic authority of somebody used to being obeyed. "Now move." Nora came down after him, pale and soaked from the rain. She was in her 70s, heavy-set, with trembling hands and sharp eyes that kept darting toward the hatch. The screaming below had stopped again. Deputy Vane crouched near the chain, but didn't touch it. "Either of them say your names?" he asked. "Either of who?" I said. Vane ignored me. "Did they?" "No," Nora exhaled shakily. "Good." Mara folded her arms. "Can somebody explain what the hell is happening?" Vane looked at the dry floor drain. His expression changed immediately. "When did you open the basement?" "About 15 minutes ago." "God damn it," Nora whispered. "Harold." Vane stood abruptly and holstered the revolver. "We need to seal the outer door and get everybody upstairs now." The hatch shook again, this time accompanied by a sound I recognized instantly from old apartment buildings and cheap motel rooms. A key ring rattling against metal. Someone below was unlocking something. Mara heard it too, her face drained. Vane moved fast then, grabbing the folding chair and wedging it through the chain links over the hatch handle like a barricade. "Upstairs," he barked. "What's down there?" I demanded. He looked directly at me for the first time. 3 men broke out of Tioga County Transport yesterday morning, he said. One of them used to work maintenance in this house 15 years ago. The basement went completely still beneath us. No coughing, no movement. Then, very softly, from directly under the steel hatch, "You should have stayed out of the basement, Danny." Nobody except family called me Danny. And Frank Mercer was dead. Nobody moved for a second after the voice said my name. The basement lights hummed overhead. Water ticked somewhere in the pipes. I could hear Mara breathing beside me, shallow now, controlled in the way people breathe when panic is close and they're trying to negotiate with it. Deputy Vane stared at the hatch. "You know that voice?" he asked. "No," I lied immediately. But I did. Not exactly. Not enough to place it cleanly. The tone scraped at memory without fully opening it, like hearing a song through apartment walls. familiar in all the wrong ways. Nora noticed my hesitation. Her face tightened. "Daniel," I said, "I don't know." The hatch shuddered once beneath the chair barricade. Veins snapped into motion. Everybody upstairs. Kitchen, now. Nobody argued this time. The farmhouse suddenly felt structured in my mind in a way it hadn't before. Basement beneath us. Kitchen directly above. Mudroom and back porch behind the kitchen. Narrow hallway leading to the dining room and front staircase. Upstairs bedrooms overlooking the gravel driveway and tree line. Too many entrances. Too many blind corners. We climbed fast. Halfway up the stairs, the basement lights flickered hard enough to dim almost black. Mara grabbed the railing. "Please tell me that's weather." "It's old wiring," Nora said too quickly. The second we entered the kitchen, Vane slammed the basement door shut and shoved the oak kitchen table against it with surprising strength for his age. The legs screeched across the floorboards. "Windows," he said. "Check every one." Mara and I split instinctively. I took the dining room and front parlor. The old house creaked under the wind, every sound amplified now that we knew armed men might be somewhere inside or underneath it. Rain streaked the tall windows facing the driveway. The estate grounds stretched gray and empty beyond them, carriage shed to the east, greenhouse behind it, woods pressing close from three sides. No cars besides ours. No movement. But the front door was unlocked. I swore under my breath and shoved the deadbolt into place. From upstairs came a loud thump. Everybody froze. Another thump followed immediately overhead, directly above the kitchen this time. Mara shouted, "Someone's upstairs." Vane drew the revolver again. Nora grabbed his sleeve. "Harold, we can't leave them roaming the house." He started for the staircase. I followed before thinking. "Daniel," Mara hissed. "What, you want him going alone?" "No, I want none of us doing this." But she came anyway because the alternatives were worse. The staircase rose from the front hall in a narrow switchback, with old framed photographs covering the walls. Frank in hunting gear, my mother as a teenager, black and white pictures of the property from the 40s. The house smelled different upstairs, less mildew, more dust and cedar and stale linen. The second floor landing opened into a long central hallway. 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, an office at the far end overlooking the backyard. Another thump came from inside the office. Vane lifted a hand for silence. We listened, dragging. Then a sudden violent crash against glass. Mara flinched hard. Vane kicked the office door open with the revolver raised. A shape exploded upward from behind the desk. I shouted. Vane nearly fired. Then feathers blasted across the room. A wild turkey slammed into the window again in blind panic, wings hammering the glass. For one insane second, none of us moved, and Mara bent forward laughing once, sharp and breathless and bordering on hysteria. Oh my God. The bird flapped wildly around the office, knocking papers everywhere. One window pane had already shattered inward, probably during the storm earlier. The turkey had trapped itself inside. Vane lowered the gun slowly. Jesus Christ. Even Nora laughed weakly at that, though her hands still trembled. The relief lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then we heard the basement door downstairs slam open. Not the polite sound of a latch turning, a violent crack of wood splitting. Vane swore and ran. We stumbled after him, down the staircase fast enough that Mara nearly slipped in socks on the polished wood. The kitchen came into view all at once. The table had been shoved aside. The basement door hung crooked on one hinge. Cold air poured upward from below, carrying damp concrete smells, and something sharper now: sweat, body odor, stale cigarettes. The hatch was still downstairs beneath us somewhere. Open or closed, we didn't know. "Elise," Nora whispered. The realization hit simultaneously. She had never come back. Vane moved toward the basement stairs carefully. "Stay behind me." Mara grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen block with shaking fingers. "You know that does nothing against a gun, right?" I muttered. "I know it does something against a person." "Fair enough." The basement lights were off now. Only my flashlight cut through the dark. The staircase felt steeper, descending the second time. More enclosed, the smell stronger. At the bottom, the chair barricade still sat jammed through the chain. The hatch remained shut, but someone had been here. Mud tracked across the floor, fresh, wet, leading toward the far wall beyond the furnace. I swept the flashlight over stacked shelving until the beam landed on an opening I hadn't noticed before, a narrow utility corridor hidden behind hanging plastic tarps. "Back there," I whispered. The corridor led beneath the house toward the rear foundation. Pipes ran overhead low enough to duck under. The concrete narrowed tighter and tighter until the flashlight finally revealed an old steel bulkhead door at the far end. Open 3 inches. Rainwater blew inward through the gap. Mara whispered, "There's an exterior exit." Nora nodded reluctantly. "Coal delivery access originally." Vane crouched near the muddy prints. "At least one person came up from below." "At least one went outside," I said. "No," he replied quietly. "Tracks point inward." That settled horribly in my stomach. Someone had entered the basement from outside after we were already inside the house. The utility corridor suddenly felt claustrophobic. Pipes pinged overhead with temperature changes. Water dripped somewhere unseen. My flashlight beam trembled every time my hand shook. Then came a noise from behind us. A low scraping sound back in the main basement room. We spun. The hatch chain rattled once, twice, then stopped. Nobody spoke. Vane moved first, backing us slowly out of the corridor toward the main basement. The flashlight beam swept over shelves, tools, old paint cans. The folding chair was no longer wedged through the chain. It lay tipped sideways on the floor. Nobody had heard it move. Mara whispered, "How?" The chain itself still looked locked, but loose now. Slack. Vane approached carefully and aimed the revolver downward. The hatch stood open half an inch, just enough for blackness underneath to breathe cold air upward. Nora made a soft sound in her throat. "Harold, back upstairs," he said. "What about whoever's down there? There's nothing we can do without county backup." Mara snapped. "Then where is county backup?" Vane's jaw tightened. "Road washout near Mansfield. State police already stretched on the escape search. Closest units 40 minutes minimum." 40, a sudden clang interrupted her. From beneath the hatch, metal hitting concrete, then footsteps coming upward. Vane fired once instantly. The revolver blast inside the basement was unbearable. My ears rang violently. Dust shook from the rafters. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Then a man screamed below us. Not hit. Startled. "Jesus Christ. Stop shooting." A second voice barked, "Shut up." Mara grabbed my sleeve hard enough to hurt. Vane backed away from the hatch. "Move." We retreated up the stairs fast, nearly tripping over each other. Halfway up, the basement lights died completely. The darkness below became absolute. The kitchen above suddenly looked painfully bright. Vane slammed the damaged basement door as best he could and shoved the refrigerator partially in front of it this time. The old floorboards groaned under the weight. Then we heard an engine outside. All of us rushed toward the front windows. A dark pickup truck crawled slowly up the gravel driveway through the rain. For one hopeful second, I thought police. Then Mara said, "That's Elise's car." The pickup stopped crooked near ours. Driver's door opened. Elise stepped out alone, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. She stumbled toward the porch. Vane unlocked the door just enough to drag her inside before relocking it. "What happened?" Nora demanded. Elise looked close to shock. Rainwater dripped from her hair onto the hardwood. "There's another one," she gasped. Everybody started talking at once. "Where? You saw him? Was he armed?" Elise pointed shakily toward the back of the property. "Greenhouse." Vane grabbed her shoulders. "Slow down." "I went outside to call 911, she said. "No signal near the road." I drove toward the ridge to get reception and saw movement near the greenhouse. Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe it was one of you." "It was. I know that now." She swallowed hard. "He had blood on his jacket. He came out from behind the greenhouse carrying bolt cutters." Nobody spoke. Elise continued. "He saw me watching and started toward the truck. Fast. I drove off before he reached me." "The third escapee," Vane muttered. Then the lights went out. The entire house dropped into darkness so suddenly that someone cried out, "Maybe Nora, maybe me." Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere downstairs came the heavy thud of the basement door shifting against the refrigerator. Then another. The power outage changed everything immediately. No security lights outside. No visibility through the windows except gray storm light. No hum of appliances to cover sound. Only the house breathing around us. Mara clicked on her phone flashlight. Backup plan. Vane looked toward the mudroom. Generator. Nora shook her head instantly. Frank stopped using it. "Why?" He said the fuel line leaked. "Then we fix it." Harold, another impact hit the basement door below the kitchen. Wood cracked loudly. We all jumped. Vane made the decision then. "Listen carefully. Generator shed is 20 yards behind the carriage barn. We get power back. We get the landline booster and exterior floodlights. Maybe enough signal for emergency calls." "And if greenhouse guy is outside?" Mara asked. Vane looked exhausted suddenly. "Older. Then we move fast." The geography of the property unfolded in my head again. Front porch facing driveway, carriage shed to the east, greenhouse farther back near the tree line, generator shed beyond that beside the propane tank. Too much open ground. Too many places to hide. "We should stay inside," Elise whispered, "and wait for them to come through the basement door." Mara shot back. A loud crack answered her. The basement doorframe splintered visibly behind the refrigerator. Nobody argued after that. Vane handed me the revolver reloads from his pocket. "If something happens to me, don't do that," I said immediately. "Daniel." His tone shut me up. Mara grabbed flashlights from the utility drawer. Nora took the fireplace poker from beside the living room hearth with trembling hands. Another slam hit below us. The refrigerator shifted an inch across the floorboards. Vane opened the mudroom door. Rain and cold wind blasted into the house. "We run straight for the generator shed," he said. "No stopping, no separating." Then, from somewhere out near the greenhouse, came 2 sharp whistle blasts, answered immediately by one from beneath the kitchen floor. The men outside, and below had found each other. And the refrigerator moved again. The refrigerator moved 6 inches before any of us moved at all. It scraped across the kitchen floor with a deep wooden groan, pushed from the other side by whatever body had wedged itself against the broken basement door below it. A magnet shaped like a trout dropped off the freezer and cracked in half on the tile. Vane raised the revolver toward the basement door. "Not yet," Nora said. He didn't look at her. "They come through, I shoot. And then the other one outside hears exactly where you are." That made him pause. The whistle came again from near the greenhouse. 2 sharp notes. Then the answer from below. 1, close. 2, close. Mara grabbed my sleeve. "Daniel, generator now." We ran. Out the mudroom, down the slick back steps, into rain so cold it punched the breath out of my mouth. The yard behind the house sloped toward the carriage shed on the left and the greenhouse farther back on the right, its glass panes gray and broken in places. Beyond both stood the smaller generator shed beside the propane tank, maybe 20 yards farther than it had looked from inside. Mud sucked at our shoes. Vane went first, revolver low. Elise stumbled behind him, still shaking from whatever she'd seen at the greenhouse. Nora moved slower, one hand clamped to her side, poker dragging through wet grass. Mara stayed beside me with the knife in one hand and a flashlight in the other, the beam jumping everywhere. Halfway across the yard, someone stepped out from behind the greenhouse. Tall, hood up, bolt cutters in one hand. He didn't rush us. He just watched. Vane fired once. The shot cracked flat in the rain. The man dropped behind the greenhouse wall, glass clattering as he hit it or shoved through it. Mara yanked me forward. "Don't stop." We reached the carriage shed first. Its sliding door hung open, showing old tractor parts, stacked lumber, and Frank's riding mower under a tarp. Vane pointed toward the generator shed beyond. "Keep going." Then Elise screamed. A man came out of the carriage shed behind the mower, face gaunt, beard patchy, clothes soaked black. He grabbed Elise by the back of her coat and pulled her off her feet. Everything became very small and loud. Elise's boots kicked mud. Mara shouted. Vane turned too fast on wet grass and slipped to one knee. The man dragged Elise backward into the shed. He had something in his hand, not a gun. A sharpened screwdriver, maybe. I hit him with the flashlight, not heroically, not cleanly. I swung because he was close, and Elise was making this awful choked sound. The flashlight struck his cheekbone with a hard plastic crack. He let go of Elise, but slashed wildly. Pain opened across my left forearm, bright and immediate. Mara slammed into him shoulder first. They both fell into a stack of lumber. Vane got there then. He didn't shoot. Too close. He kicked the man in the ribs once, twice, until the screwdriver skittered into the mud. Nora, breathing hard, brought the fireplace poker down across the man's wrist. He screamed, a real scream. Human, hurt. Elise crawled away sobbing. "Hands where I can see them," Vane barked. The man curled around his broken wrist, gasping, "Don't leave me out here with him." That stopped us. "With who?" I said. He looked past us toward the greenhouse. His eyes were wide and animal bright. "Cal Rusk." Vane swore under his breath. Mara had already grabbed my arm. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." Blood ran warm into my palm despite the rain. She yanked a dish towel from Elise's dropped bag. Elise had grabbed it from the kitchen without realizing and wrapped it tight around the cut. The injured man laughed once, wetly. You people opened it, didn't you? Vane grabbed him by the collar. Where's Rusk? The man smiled through blood on his teeth. And the generator shed door banged open behind us. The world narrowed again. Cal Rusk stood in the doorway holding Vane's spare fuel can in one hand and Elise's phone in the other. He was broad, middle-aged, with a shaved head and a rain jacket darkened by mud and blood. The bolt cutters hung from a strap over his shoulder. And I knew him, not from my life, from photographs. Frank had kept old property albums in the office. One of them showed a younger Cal Rusk standing beside the basement bulkhead, wearing a maintenance company shirt, grinning with one arm around a boy of maybe 12. Me, I remembered then. Summer visits. Frank paying local guys cash for repairs. A man who called me Danny because he used to toss me a baseball while Frank argued about invoices. Evening, Danny, Cal said. Vane aimed the revolver. Cal lifted the fuel can higher. Shoot, and we all burn. The smell hit then. Gasoline. Sharp and oily, cutting through rain and mud. He had poured it around the generator shed. Maybe on the floor inside. Maybe on himself too. I couldn't tell. Mara whispered, "Oh God." Cal looked at her. Nobody's dying if everybody behaves. From inside the house came a crash, the basement door giving way. Nora closed her eyes. "Harold," Cal smiled. "My boys are coming up." Vane kept the gun trained on him. "One of your boys is on the ground with a broken wrist." Walt always was slow. Walt spat mud near Vane's boot. The house behind us sat dark and huge in the rain. The back door hung open. If the men from below reached the kitchen, they would have access to the whole house, the road, our car keys, everything. Cal said, "I need the old ledger, Frank's basement keys, and one vehicle, that's it." "The ledger," I said. His eyes moved to me. Frank wrote down things he shouldn't. What things? Where county boys like to store things when evidence rooms got too full. Where cash went missing. Who got paid. His smile thinned. That trap room under your uncle's house was useful long before I used it. Nora's face crumpled with a kind of sick recognition. Vane didn't deny it fast enough. Mara noticed. "So did I, Harold," Nora whispered. Vane's jaw worked. "Frank found out. He threatened to report it." Cal laughed. "Frank helped build it." "No," Nora said. Cal pointed at her with Elise's phone. "Ask her why he had rules. Ask her why the drain mattered." Nora looked at the ground. The answer came from the house before she could speak. A man shouting from the kitchen, then another crashing sound. Time disappeared. Mara leaned close to me. "Generator fuel line." "What?" Frank stopped using it because it leaked. I stared at her. She looked toward the generator shed, then the gasoline can in Cal's hand, then the propane tank beside the shed. Not an explosion fantasy. Not like movies. A leak. Fumes. Fire risk. Enough danger to scare Cal away from the shed if we could make him believe it was worse than it was. "Elise," Mara whispered. "When I say run, take Nora to the house side of the carriage shed." Elise nodded, barely. Vane heard us but didn't react. Cal stepped forward. "Ledger, keys, now." I lifted my good hand slowly. "They're inside. Then go get them. Your guys are inside. Then go carefully." I looked at him, at the fuel can, at the generator shed behind him. And then I did the most useful stupid thing I had done all day. I laughed. Cal's face changed. "Something funny. You came here for the ledger and didn't check the blue cabinet." His eyes flicked. Just once. But it was enough. Mara moved. She threw the kitchen knife at the fuel can. It didn't stab through like in a movie. It hit the plastic side and bounced off. But Cal flinched, and Vane fired. The bullet struck the shed doorframe beside Cal's shoulder, splintering wood into his face. Cal stumbled back. The fuel can dropped. Gasoline splashed across the shed floor and mud. Mara screamed, "Run!" Elise grabbed Nora and dragged her toward the carriage shed wall. I tackled Vane sideways as Cal swung the bolt cutters where his head had been. The metal jaws clipped Vane's shoulder with a sickening thud. Vane went down hard. The revolver spun into the mud. Cal lunged for it. So did I. My cut arm gave out the second my weight hit it. Pain flashed white behind my eyes. Cal's boot caught my ribs and drove the air out of me. Then Mara was on his back. She wrapped both arms around his neck and pulled with everything she had. Cal staggered, cursing, trying to throw her off. He slammed her backward against the generator shed wall. Once, twice, she didn't let go. The shed light suddenly flickered. The generator coughed. Once, twice. Frank's old automatic transfer system tried to start after the outage. Gas fumes hung in the air. Cal realized it at the same time I did. His face shifted from rage to calculation to fear. He stopped fighting Mara and tried to move away from the shed. Vane, still on the ground, grabbed Cal's ankle with his good arm. "Daniel," Mara shouted. The revolver lay in mud 3 feet from me. I couldn't reach it, but Nora could. She came out of nowhere, soaked and shaking, and kicked it toward Vane. Cal kicked Vane in the face. Vane's grip loosened. Cal tore free, throwing Mara off. She hit the ground hard and didn't get up right away. The generator coughed again, then caught. A rough mechanical roar filled the yard. The floodlights mounted on the carriage shed snapped on, blazing white through rain. Everything became visible. Cal, Walt curled by the lumber. Elise sobbing behind a tractor tire. Nora with the fireplace poker. Mara on hands and knees, gasping. Me in the mud. And behind us, at the open mudroom door, 2 men emerging from the house. One held Frank's basement ledger. The other held the blue cabinet keys. The man with the ledger saw Cal standing in gasoline-slick mud beside the running generator and shouted, "Cal, too late." Cal turned toward them. Mara, still on the ground, reached out and yanked the shed's hanging extension cord from a puddle where it sparked weakly at a frayed splice. Not at Cal, away from the gasoline. She killed the spark by ripping it loose from the outlet, burning her palm, but stopping the thing we were all terrified of from happening. Cal used that second to run. He charged toward the greenhouse. Vane, blood running from his nose, raised the revolver with both hands. "Stop," Cal didn't. Vane fired. Cal pitched forward into the mud before reaching the broken glass. The sound he made was small. The 2 men at the mudroom froze. Floodlights washed over them. The ledger sagged in one man's hand. Mara stood unsteadily, face twisted with pain, and shouted, "Drop it." Maybe it was her voice. Maybe the lights. Maybe Cal down in the mud. They dropped everything. By the time police finally reached the property, nearly 30 minutes later, Vane had cuffed Walt with zip ties from the generator shed. The other 2 escapees were face down in the kitchen, and Cal Rusk was alive, but bleeding badly from a gunshot wound high in the thigh. No one talked much. Mara sat on the carriage shed floor with her burned hand wrapped in a wet towel. Elise had stopped crying, but kept making tiny hiccuping breaths. Nora stood in the rain staring at the basement bulkhead like it had been waiting all these years to open its mouth. I held Frank's ledger against my chest, with my bleeding arm going numb. Inside the house, The basement door hung broken. Below it, the trapdoor was open. And from somewhere under the floor, water had started running into the drain again. The ambulance lights made the old farmhouse look theatrical, which felt wrong. Red washed over the wet porch boards, the cream kitchen cabinets, the broken basement door. Then blue came after it and turned everything colder. Rain still fell, but softer now, dripping from the porch gutters in steady lines. The floodlights on the carriage shed stayed on, harsh and white, showing the muddy yard exactly as it was. Gouged footprints, one overturned fuel can, blood diluted into pink threads, and Mara sitting on an oxygen case with her burned hand wrapped in gauze. Nobody said much at first. Police separated us because that is what they do when a scene is messy and everyone has touched something. I sat in the back of an ambulance with a blanket over my shoulders while a paramedic cleaned the cut on my forearm. The antiseptic burned worse than the cut itself. Deep, but not tendon, she said. You'll need stitches. I nodded like she had told me the weather. Across the yard, Cal Rusk was loaded onto a stretcher with 2 deputies watching him like he might still find a way to turn gauze into a weapon. He was conscious, pale, furious. When they lifted him, his eyes found mine through the rain. He smiled, not big, not victorious, just enough to tell me he knew something I didn't. I looked away first. Mara saw. Of course she saw. Don't, she said from her oxygen case. Don't what? Start building a whole conspiracy around one look. You don't think there's one? I think there's already enough without you helping it grow teeth. Her voice was rough, exhausted, and more tender than she probably intended. Her right palm was blistered where she'd yanked the sparking cord free. 2 fingers on her left hand were taped together from hitting the shed wall. She looked smaller in the floodlights. Not weak, just used up. Elise sat on the porch steps wrapped in a sheriff's jacket, answering questions in short, precise sentences. Her face had emptied out. Realtor calm, but cracked down the middle. When a deputy asked whether she had known about the basement access before that day, she said no 3 times, each one quieter. Nora refused the ambulance until Vane told her to stop being dramatic. Then she slapped him. Not hard, not enough to injure, enough to make every deputy nearby pretend not to see it. You knew, she said. Vane touched his split lip and looked at the mud. Some. How much? Enough to know Frank was scared. That's not an answer. No, he said. It is. They took his revolver after that. I didn't see him object. By midnight, the farmhouse was full of people with gloves and cameras. The state police arrived first, then county investigators, then men in jackets who talked in clipped voices near the basement stairs. Nobody let us back down there. They taped the kitchen, the mudroom, the cellar door, the bulkhead outside, and eventually half the yard. The trapdoor stayed open. From where I sat near the dining room wall with my stitched arm bandaged tight, I could see only a rectangle of darkness beyond the broken basement door and the slow movement of flashlights below. At 1:17 a.m., a trooper came upstairs carrying Frank's ledger in a clear evidence bag. I stood too fast and nearly fell. Sir, the trooper said, you need to sit. That's my Uncle S. It's evidence now. What's in it? He gave me the look officials give civilians when they have decided the truth is not useful in real time. You'll be contacted. Mara put a hand on my shoulder. Daniel, I sat. That became the shape of the next few days. Sit, wait, answer, repeat yourself. Get corrected by your own memory. Sign medical papers. give statements, go home to a hotel because nobody was allowed to stay at the estate, wake up hearing 3 knocks from the room next door, only to realize it was the ice machine. Cal survived surgery. Walt had a fractured wrist. The other 2 men were charged with escape, assault, unlawful restraint, and a list of things that grew longer every time the local news updated. Their names blurred together after a while. The articles called the underground space a concealed storage chamber, which made it sound like Frank had been keeping Christmas decorations down there. It was not that. 2 weeks later, a state investigator named Renner met Mara and me in a conference room at the Tioga County Courthouse. Nora came too. Elise did not. Vane was not invited. Renner was a square-built woman with tired eyes and a neat stack of folders. She did not waste time. The chamber under the basement appears to have been built in stages, she said. Original cold storage, later reinforced. At some point, likely in the late 80s or early 90s, it was modified with a lockable hatch, ventilation, drainage, and shelving. For what? Mara asked. Renner looked at Nora. Nora stared at the tabletop. Renner said, temporary storage of seized items before formal logging. At least initially. Evidence, I said. Cash, weapons, contraband, paperwork. Some of it never made it into official inventory. And Frank knew. Renner folded her hands. Uncle did maintenance work on the property. Some county personnel used the location with his cooperation years ago. Later, according to the ledger, he tried to document what had been stored there and who accessed it. Nora spoke then. Frank was a coward before he got careful. No one contradicted her. She kept her eyes on the table. He thought if he wrote everything down, that made it better. He always thought a record could stand in for courage. I wanted to defend him. He was dead. He had left warnings. He had tried, eventually. But I also thought of the chair facing the hatch, the rules, the line, they will lie. How did Cal know about it? Mara asked. He worked on the property, Renner said. He also had connections to 2 former deputies currently under investigation. Vane, Renner did not answer directly. Mr. Vane has retained counsel. Nora let out one bitter laugh. Of course he has. Frank's death remained officially accidental. That was the part I hated most. No evidence of homicide. No witness. No signs of forced entry that night. He had gone outside after midnight, fallen near the back steps, and struck his head on stone edging slick with frost. His final ledger entry remained just ink on paper. Drain dry. Did not call and thought I heard Rose. Mistake. Renner said they could not build a case on that. I understood. Understanding didn't help. When we were finally allowed back to the estate in December, snow had replaced the mud. A clean inch covered the driveway and carriage shed roof, softening everything. The greenhouse looked almost pretty from a distance, broken panes glittering in the weak morning sun. Inside, the house smelled of bleach, cold dust, and plywood. The basement door had been replaced temporarily with a sheet of screwed-in board. Yellow tape still crossed it, though the investigation below had finished. Lise met us there because she still had the listing keys. She looked thinner. Her hair was tied back without its usual polish. I'm not pushing you to sell, she said before I asked. I just need to know what you want done with utilities. I looked around the kitchen. The trout magnet was gone. The refrigerator had been moved back, but the floor still showed deep gouges where it had scraped. I don't know, I said. That was the first honest thing I had said about the house. Mara made coffee from a packet she'd brought herself. None of us trusted anything left in the cabinets. We drank it standing by the sink because the table had been taken as evidence and returned with fingerprint powder in its cracks. Nora arrived 10 minutes later with a cardboard box. "Frank wanted you to have these," she said. Inside were photographs, receipts, a tire pressure gauge still in its plastic package, a birthday card for my mother he had never mailed. At the bottom was a smaller notebook, not the basement ledger. This one was labeled House Personal. I opened it slowly. Most pages were boring. Furnace service dates, roof repairs, notes about Nora's arthritis medication pickup, a reminder to send me a Christmas card, though he had misspelled my apartment number. Near the back, in Frank's careful hand, was one page marked, "If Daniel comes." Mara read it over my shoulder. "Tell him the house is not a gift unless he can afford what comes with it. Tell him selling is not betrayal. Tell him Rose always said he tried to rescue people when apology would do. Tell him not every locked door is asking to be opened." I closed the notebook before anyone could see my face properly. Mara pretended to study the coffee maker. Nora said, "He loved your mother. I know, he was ashamed of things. I know that too, but I hadn't known, not really. I had inherited a house and thought I could reduce it to paperwork. Square footage, estimated value, repairs, debts paid, clean exit. Instead, I had inherited procedures. Silence, a hidden room, other people's crimes folded into my family's walls. The estate sold in March, not as a charming rural farmhouse, not after the news. It went to a contractor from Scranton who specialized in distressed properties and spoke cheerfully about gutting it down to the bones. I signed everything with my left arm still stiff from the scar tissue, and Mara beside me, making sure I read the pages instead of pretending I had. Lise handled the sale. She charged a reduced commission. I didn't ask why. Nora moved in with her daughter in Williamsport before spring thaw. She sent me one letter, handwritten, saying she had told investigators everything she remembered and some things she had spent years trying not to remember. At the end she wrote, "Frank was not innocent. He was not the worst man there either. Both can be true." I kept that letter. I also kept the personal notebook. The basement ledger stayed with the state. Vane's name appeared in the paper only once, months later, in an article about an ongoing corruption inquiry. "Retired deputy cooperating," it said. That phrasing made Mara so angry she threw the newspaper into my sink. Cal Rusk took a plea after his 2 accomplices testified. Walt did too. None of them mentioned my mother. None admitted to being near the house the night Frank died. Cal's lawyer suggested Frank had been confused, frightened by sounds in an old basement, and careless on icy steps. Maybe. That is the worst word in the world after something like this. Maybe. By summer, my arm had healed into a pale raised line. Mara's palm scarred in a crescent where the cord burned her. She still flexed it when she was tired. Elise left real estate for a job at an insurance office. Nora never went back to Wellsboro. I drove past the estate once in July because I told myself I wanted closure, and because I am still, apparently, the kind of man who thinks walking toward a bad feeling will make it explain itself. The contractor had stripped the porch rails. A dumpster sat near the carriage shed. The greenhouse was gone. The generator shed too. The kitchen window was open. From the road, I could see work lights inside and hear a radio playing classic rock. Ordinary, almost aggressively ordinary. Then a worker carried something out through the mudroom. A square piece of painted wood, cream-colored, the old basement door. He leaned it against the dumpster, wiped sweat from his forehead, and went back inside. I pulled over without meaning to. The note was still taped to it, weathered, torn at one corner, but readable from where I sat. Wait for 2 people. A crow called from the tree line. Traffic hissed behind me on Route 6. Somewhere inside the gutted house, a hammer started up again. I should have driven away. Instead, I got out and crossed the ditch, my shoes sinking into damp grass, and stood in front of the discarded door. Below the first note, half hidden under old tape residue, was another line I had never noticed before, written in pencil, faint enough that it only showed when the sunlight hit at an angle. If Daniel hears Rose, make him leave. I stood there until one of the workers asked if I needed help. I said no. Then I got in my car and drove back toward Pittsburgh with both hands on the wheel, the radio off, and the windows down because the air inside had started to feel too close. I sold the house. I gave statements. I paid the debt. Life went on because it always does, even when it has no manners. But sometimes, late at night, my apartment pipes knock 3 times when the heat kicks on. Once, twice, 3. I know what it is. Old metal, pressure changes, buildings settling. I know. I still wait for them to stop before I answer anyone. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming. You're listening to Mia Horror Stories, and today's story is I'm an archivist. The rules for handling the 1920s tapes must not be broken. The screen will stay completely black, letting your imagination do all the work. No visuals, no noise, just a story that creeps under your skin. Don't skip a second, because every detail builds to the chilling end you won't want to miss. I'll keep this as the introduction only, grounded, no supernatural reveal, ending with a choice that pulls them toward the larger conflict without exposing it yet. Thought for 4s, the first thing wrong was the tape moving by itself. Not much, half an inch, maybe less. A lazy little creep across the foam pad inside the quarantine cabinet, like the reel had exhaled and settled. It was still explainable. Old acetate warps, metal hubs slip. The HVAC in the basement of the Maryland Historical Media Archive kicked hard enough to rattle the light diffusers when the boilers woke up. Nothing in that room stayed perfectly still for long. My name is Daniel Mercer, 36, male, and I'm the senior audiovisual archivist for the archive's film and sound collection in Baltimore. Senior mostly meant I was the person trusted to say no. No, you can't play that cylinder on a modern stylus, no. We can't digitize a moldy reel without isolation, no. Your grandfather, lost jazz recording, is probably a church picnic with a banjo. I liked saying no. It made the world orderly. That was my private weakness, though I wouldn't have called it that then. I believed rules could keep damage contained. At 7:14 that morning, I was alone with 6 metal canisters from 1928, a humming fume extractor, and a laminated sheet titled Handling Rules GARDNERTAPES. Do not deviate, the sheet had been typed recently, not in the 20s. Calibri font. Fresh lamination. Someone had underlined Rule 4 twice in red marker. Do not rewind by hand. I stood there with my coffee cooling on the workbench, staring through the cabinet glass at the leftmost reel. It had shifted just enough that its leader now touched the rubber stop. The tape itself was a dull brown-black, glossy in places where vinegar syndrome had started sweating through the binder. The room smelled like old film, wet cardboard, and the faint pickle tang of decay. Behind me, the badge reader clicked. "Tell me you didn't start without me," said Elise. Elise Hart, 42, female, was our conservation manager, a careful woman from Vermont who wore linen shirts even in winter and kept 3 pencils in her hair because she hated losing time searching for one. She had a way of talking softly that made everyone else lower their voice. Her patience was not kindness exactly. It was discipline. "I opened the cabinet," I said. "That's not starting." She set her bag down and looked at the quarantine box. "Why is that real against the stop?" "I was hoping you'd tell me." Elise leaned close, not touching the glass. Her reflection hovered over the tape, pale face, sharp eyes, mouth pulled tight. "Airflow. That's what I'm telling myself." "Good," she said. "Keep telling yourself that until we have data." That was Elise. Never frightened, never dismissive, just allergic to sloppy conclusions. The Gardner tapes had arrived the previous afternoon from a private estate outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, packed in a cedar trunk with moth flakes, newspaper from 1959, and a handwritten donor note that said only, "For institutional custody, not for exhibition." Nobody sent 6 1920s magnetic-looking reels to an archive without wanting attention. But these weren't magnetic tape, not really. They were early experimental sound on film strips wound onto custom aluminum hubs, narrow gauge, brittle, probably homemade. The kind of thing that made donors say priceless and made archivists say unstable. At 7:22, Malik came in carrying a camera tripod and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. Malik Boyd, 28, male, was our digitization technician from Philadelphia, fast with machines and too trusting of them. Could rebuild a Steenbeck in an afternoon, but had once tried to dry a wet drive with a space heater. He wore headphones around his neck even when he wasn't listening to anything, like a stethoscope for electronics. He stopped when he saw both of us staring. "Nope," he said. "I don't like the museum people gathered in a circle. That means something expensive is dying. Maybe just shifting," I said. "Old stuff doesn't shift before breakfast." Elise pointed at his sandwich. "No food in lab." He looked wounded. "It's wrapped. Wrapped food is still food." He backed into the hallway, took one resentful bite, swallowed too fast, and came back wiping his hands on a paper towel. We documented everything before touching it. That was rule 1 and also common sense. Malik set up the camera. Elise read off the canister labels. I entered condition notes into the database, trying not to look at the laminated rules too often. The rules were strange, but not impossible strange. Wear nitrile over cotton gloves. Keep reels horizontal. Do not expose to direct task light for longer than 30 seconds. Photograph before and after each movement. Do not rewind by hand. Do not play audio in open air. Monitoring must be through closed headphones only. If leader contains red wax mark, stop transfer and notify EVOS. That last name bothered me. Who's Voss? Malik asked, because he had been reading over my shoulder. Elise, I said. She shook her head. No idea. Donor rep, maybe. I checked the accession email again. The donor contact was a law office in Harrisburg. No Voss, no explanation. Just scanned paperwork and a note from administration saying the materials had been accepted under restricted research status. Restricted was normal. Anonymous donors were normal. Weird rules were normal if the donor was rich enough. Still, the tape had moved. At 8:03, Nora from collections came down with the chain of custody folder. Nora Whitcomb, 61, female, was the head registrar, originally from Boston, with silver hair cut blunt at her jaw and reading glasses that hung on a blue cord. She had survived 3 directors, 2 floods, 1 attempted theft of Civil War letters, and every intern who thought archive meant library with ghosts. She trusted forms more than people, which made her difficult and useful. You 3 look cheerful, she said. Do you know any Voss? I asked. Nora's hand paused on the folder clip. Just a small pause, but I saw it. Where did you hear that name? Elise looked at me. Malik stopped adjusting the tripod. It's on the handling rules, I said. Nora opened the folder with too much care. Then follow the handling rules. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have. A truck groaned somewhere above us on Park Avenue, the sound traveling through old brick and pipe. The fluorescent tube over the sink flickered twice and steadied. In the cabinet, the tape leader lay against the stop, thin as a dead insect leg. Nora placed the folder on the clean bench. Administration wants a preliminary condition report by noon. No playback today unless Daniel signs off. I haven't signed off. Good, Malik frowned. Then why bring the transfer deck? Nora looked at him. Because the director asked whether transfer was possible today, and I told her possible is not the same as advisable. That should have settled it. We could photograph, inspect, write our report, and leave the reels sealed until we had more provenance. That was the correct thing. Then Nora removed a smaller envelope from the back of the folder. This was inside the cedar trunk, she said. It was stuck under the lining. I found it last night. The envelope was brittle cream paper, slit open along one side. On the front, in fountain pen, someone had written, "For the first archivist who thinks rules are superstition." Malik gave a quiet laugh, then saw nobody else was laughing. Nora handed it to Elise, not me. Elise slid out a single sheet. The paper crackled in the dry lab air. She read silently first. Her face did not change, but one of the pencils in her hair slipped and clicked onto the floor. "What?" I said. She passed it to me. The note was dated October 3, 1931. The handwriting was elegant, but rushed. The ink faded brown at the edges. It did not explain the tapes, did not mention murder or curses, or anything dramatic enough to make the situation simple. It was worse in its plainness. It said the recordings were not to be auditioned in company. It said the operator must never allow more than one person to monitor the sound at a time. It said if any voice on the recording appears to answer the room, the operator should stop immediately and seal the reel. I read that line twice. "Appears," I said. Elise watched me. That word is doing a lot of work. Like leaned in. Could be an early sound experiment, like staged interactive lectures, call and response. From 1928, I said, people were weird in every decade. He wasn't wrong. Archives teach you that. Every generation thinks it invented obsession, fraud, cruelty, love, bad jokes, and bad engineering. Then you open a box from 1912 and find all of it waiting in dust. Nora took the note back. No one plays anything today. We weren't going to, Elise said. But that was when the basement phone rang. Not my cell, not Elise's. The beige wall phone by the emergency eyewash station, a landline nobody used except facilities and security. Its ring was metallic and abrupt, too loud in the sealed room. Once, twice, Malik looked at me. Do we answer lab phones now? I picked it up on the third ring. AV lab, Daniel. For a second, there was only room tone, not silence. A low, papery hiss, like a blank tape rolling. And a man said, "Is the Gardner material open?" His voice was close to the receiver. Older, American. Calm, no, I said. Who is this? A click, then the dial tone. I kept the handset pressed to my ear until Elise touched my wrist. What did they say? She asked. I repeated it. Nora shut the folder. Malik tried to smile. Okay, that's probably admin. Nobody upstairs calls it Gardner material, Nora said. The HVAC kicked on again, blowing cold air through the ceiling vent. The loose corner of the laminated rule sheet lifted and tapped the bench. Tap, 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 cheap plastic against steel. A small sound, explainable. I hated how badly I wanted to explain it. Nora said, seal the room. I'll call security and the director. On what grounds? Malik asked. On the grounds that someone has information about restricted material they shouldn't have. That was reasonable. That was procedure. Yet I could already feel the shape of the problem forming around us. If we sealed everything, the director would involve legal. Legal would involve the donor. The donor might withdraw access, and the tapes would vanish into private storage again. Maybe forever. That happens more than people think. History doesn't disappear in fires or wars half as often as it disappears into family offices, legal caution, and climate-controlled rooms nobody is allowed to enter. Elise saw it on my face. Daniel, she said, I know. No, you don't. You're thinking like a rescuer. I'm thinking like an archivist. That's the same disease wearing better shoes. Nora gave her a look that said not now, but Elise didn't back off. You hear mystery, and you think preservation justifies urgency, she said. It doesn't. That stung because it was true. My father had been a radio engineer, the kind who could identify a bad capacitor by smell. When he died, his workshop was cleared by a junk company before I could get home from Chicago. Boxes of tapes, notebooks, test recordings, all gone because nobody knew what mattered. Since then, I had treated every unlabeled reel like it might contain someone's last proof they existed. I looked at the Gardner canisters. 6 dull circles, 6 sealed mouths. We can do a non-invasive inspection, I said. No playback, no unwinding beyond visible leader. Just verify the red wax mark issue and document the first 10 inches under camera. Nora's answer was immediate. No. Elise hesitated. I noticed. Elise, Nora said. Elise rubbed her thumb against the seam of her glove. A leader inspection is within stabilization protocol if the material is already accessioned, and the handling sheet anticipates visual markers. That note changes things. The note is provenance, I said, not procedure. Malik muttered. That sounded rehearsed. I ignored him. Nora looked at each of us in turn. Outside the lab, someone rolled a cart down the corridor, one wheel squeaking at regular intervals. The sound came closer, passed, faded toward the freight elevator. Finally, Nora said, if you open a canister, I document that you did it against registrar recommendation. Fair, I said. And if there is a red wax mark, you stop. Yes, no transfer, no transfer, no headphones, no headphones. Elise picked up the fallen pencil and slid it back into her hair. We inspect Rila only, Daniel handles. Malik photographs. I supervise condition. Nora witnesses. It was sensible, controlled, a compromise dressed as caution. I told myself that was enough. We moved slowly. Malik started recording video. Elise checked the humidity. Nora stood near the door with the folder clutched against her ribs. I placed the first canister on the padded bench and lifted the lid. The smell intensified at once, sharp vinegar and old dust, with something underneath like machine oil trapped in cloth. The reel sat nested in yellowed tissue. Its aluminum hub was stamped with a tiny maker's mark, Bell and Strake, Pittsburgh. The leader was cream-colored, curled at the edge. No red wax visible. Photograph, Elise said. Malik's camera clicked. I used ceramic tweezers to lift the leader a fraction. The tape made a dry whisper against itself. I fed out 1 inch. 2, 3. The strip resisted, then gave with a soft tick that made all of us stop breathing for half a second. Adhesion, Elise said quietly. Go slower. At 7 inches, handwriting appeared on the leader. Not a title, not a date. 3 words in black ink, block capitals, still readable after nearly a century. Do not answer the wall phone rang again. This time, nobody moved. 1 ring. 2. The tape leader trembled slightly in my tweezers. Not alive, not impossible, just reacting to the tiny shake in my hand. Nora said, put it back. The phone rang a 3rd time. Elise said, Daniel. I could put the leader back, seal the canister, and let security handle a phone call from someone who knew too much. That was the safe choice, the professional choice. Or I could keep the leader extended long enough to photograph the warning, because without proof it would become a story, and stories were easy for directors and donors and lawyers to bury. The phone kept ringing. Malik whispered, tell me what to do. I looked at the words on the leader, then at the receiver trembling faintly on its hook. Take the picture, I said, and Malik raised the camera. Malik took the picture. The camera flash bounced off the steel bench and cabinet glass, bleaching the room white for an instant. When my eyes adjusted again, the words on the tape leader looked darker somehow. The ink sunk deep into the fibers. Do not answer. The phone stopped ringing. Not gradually, just stopped between one breath and the next. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Nora said, seal it. I eased the leader back toward the reel carefully, fighting the urge to hurry. Old media punishes impatience. The tape gave another tiny sticking sound as it settled. Elise photographed the reel position again, while Malik transferred the images to the workstation. You got it sharp, I asked. Yeah, metadata timestamp too. Malik gave me a look. I know how cameras work, Daniel. I almost apologized. Instead, I reseated the canister lid. The lab suddenly felt warmer than before. Not hot exactly, but stale. HVAC had cycled down again, leaving only the low vibration of the dehumidifier and the faint electrical buzz from the transfer rack along the wall. Nora picked up the wall phone and checked for a dial tone. Still active, she said. Maybe security testing lines, Malik offered. Nora ignored him. I'm calling upstairs. She left with the folder under her arm, shoes clicking down the corridor. The door shut behind her, with the soft hydraulic, say all archive doors made. Malik leaned against the bench. Okay, I'm officially uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable every time film stock smells weird, Elise said. Yeah, but this has serial killer energy. Elaborate. The rules, the calls, the dramatic handwriting. Somebody wanted these things to feel dangerous. I peeled off my outer nitrile gloves and tossed them into the disposal bin. Or somebody learned procedures the hard way. That's not better. No, it was. Elise was already entering notes into the conservation log, calm and methodical. I envied that about her. She could place fear into compartments and label them. My own mind didn't work that way. Once something got under my skin, it spread. I walked to the sink and washed my hands longer than necessary. The water in the basement pipes always took too long to warm up. Cold at first, metallic smelling. My father used to complain about old building plumbing the same way he complained about poorly grounded amplifiers, as if infrastructure failures were personal insults. I caught myself thinking about him again and shut the water off harder than I meant to. Elise noticed. You okay? Fine. You're scrubbing skin off your fingers. I dried my hands. I said fine. That earned me a long look. The problem with archives is that they attract people who mistake preservation for control. I had spent years convincing myself that if something was cataloged correctly, stabilized correctly, stored correctly, it could never truly be lost. But every archivist eventually encounters the same truth. Objects disappear anyway, through neglect, through ego, through panic, or through people deciding the public shouldn't see them. At 8:41, Nora came back with a security officer and the deputy director. The security officer was a broad man named Tom Reyes, early 50s, male, former transit police. He moved carefully around archival materials, like he expected them to explode into paperwork. The deputy director, Vivian Keene, was younger than most administrators, maybe 34, female, sharp-featured, and permanently sleep-deprived. She wore expensive shoes unsuited for basement floors. What exactly do we have? Vivian asked before the door fully closed. Nora answered first. Restricted materials received an external inquiry from an unidentified caller before catalog publication. And the caller referenced the collection by name. Vivian rubbed her forehead. Could donor council have leaked it? Possible, Nora said. Tom looked around the room. Anything criminal? No, Elise said immediately. Not yet, Malik muttered. Vivian glanced at him. Meaning, Malik straightened. Meaning somebody S being weird. Excellent clarification. I handed Vivian the printed photo of the tape leader. She studied it silently. Jesus, she said finally. That's not an archival assessment, Elise replied. Vivian almost smiled. No, it's my personal one. Tom stepped closer. What am I looking at? An instruction written directly onto the media leader, I said, meaning whoever created or handled these tapes wanted operators following specific behavior. Tom shrugged, like safety instructions. Maybe, but you don't think so. I hesitated too long. That was answer enough. Vivian exhaled through her nose. Okay, here's where we are. The donor agreement gives us 72 hours to establish whether the material is stable enough for institutional retention. If we cannot verify condition or provenance concerns within that window, the estate reserves the right to reclaim custody pending review. Malik blinked. That's insane. It's rich people insane, Nora corrected. Vivian pointed at the canisters. So I need a preliminary assessment today. No playback, Elise said immediately. I didn't say playback. You were thinking it. Vivian crossed her arms. I'm thinking about liability. If the donor pulls these, we may never get access again. There it was, the same hook already buried in my own head. Malik noticed it too. You're both doing the same face. What face? I said. The history matters more than sleep face. Tom cleared his throat. Can I ask a dumb question? Always, Vivian said. If the tapes are dangerous somehow, why not lock them up and wait? Because old media degrades continuously, I said. And because once something leaves institutional custody, you may never see it again. Tom nodded slowly, like he understood maybe half of that. Vivian looked at me. Can you safely inspect more than the leader? Yes, Elise immediately said, not without a proper acclimatization interval. We've already acclimatized 2 hours. These were stored in uncontrolled residential conditions for decades. And every hour we wait increases the odds the estate lawyers pull them. Elise's jaw tightened. The room filled with the small sounds people make when deciding whether to argue harder, shifting feet, breath through the nose, a pen tapping once against a clipboard. Finally, Elise said, visual inspection only. No playback. No transport to the transfer room yet. Vivian nodded. Done. Nora looked disgusted, but didn't object further. We resumed work under supervision that somehow made everything feel less safe instead of more. Tom stayed near the door. Vivian hovered over the database terminal, pretending not to hover. Malik set up additional lights, while Elise prepared a humidity tent for temporary stabilization. I opened the second canister at 9:17. This reel was in worse shape. White powder spotted the outer windings. The leader had split near the edge and been repaired decades ago with amber tape brittle enough to crack if bent. No sudden tension, Elise warned quietly. I know, say it back. No sudden tension. She did this when she thought I was distracted, annoying but effective. The second leader contained no handwriting, just a typed label. Experiment 4, conversational response. Malik read it aloud before I could stop him. The room seemed to absorb the words. Tom frowned. That sounds like voice recognition. In 1928, Elise said, people were trying all kinds of mechanical response systems back then, I said automatically. Telephone switching, pattern detection, primitive synchronization experiments. You sound like Wikipedia with anxiety, Malik said. I ignored him again. The real edge crackled softly as I advanced a few more inches under magnification. The soundtrack strip looked unusually dense, almost overexposed with modulation. Then we found the damage. Near the center winding, several layers had fused together into a puckered mass. Elise leaned close. Damn, how bad? Vivian asked. Potential delamination. If separation tears the emulsion, we lose content. Can it be repaired? Yes, Elise said, slowly. How slowly? Elise slow, Malik said, which meant hours, maybe days. Vivian pressed her lips together. We don't have days. You have exactly the days chemistry allows, Elise snapped. Was the first real crack between them. Tom wandered toward the wall phone while they argued quietly. He picked up the receiver, listened, then frowned. What? He covered the mouthpiece. There's somebody on the line. Everyone stopped. You answered it, Nora said sharply. I picked it up. Same thing, Malik muttered. Tom uncovered the receiver again. Hello. We could hear a faint voice now from where we stood, tinny. Male. Tom's expression shifted slightly. Not fear, confusion. He's asking for Daniel. Every eye in the room landed on me. Don't, Elise said immediately. Tom held the receiver out anyway. Sounds elderly, maybe donor side. I didn't move. The voice continued faintly through the line. Calm, patient. Daniel Mercer, it said. You're making the same mistake your father made. The room narrowed around me, not dramatically. Just a sudden awareness of fluorescent light buzzing overhead and the taste of stale coffee still sitting bitter on my tongue. Tom lowered the receiver slowly. You know this guy? No, but my voice came out too fast. Elise stepped between me and the phone. Who is this? A pause. Then the voice said, don't let them monitor together. Click. Deadline. Nobody spoke. Malik looked at me carefully now, not joking anymore. Your father was involved with this. He restored radio equipment, I said. That's all. Did he know these tapes? I don't know. But another memory had already surfaced, whether I wanted it or not. My father at his basement workbench, headphones on, one hand raised sharply at me when I came down the stairs. Don't interrupt playback. I hadn't thought about that in years. Vivian broke the silence first. Okay, new rule. Nobody answers external calls in this room. Bit late, Malik said. Tom looked embarrassed. Sorry. It's not your fault, Elise said, though her eyes stayed on me. I could feel her recalculating things. Not suspicion exactly. Concern. That bothered me more. At 10:06, the building lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Tom checked his radio. Facilities says power fluctuation downtown. Great, Malik said. Exactly what you want around deteriorating media. The transfer workstation rebooted itself with a chime. Elise, I said quietly, staring at the monitor. She saw it too. The audio software had opened automatically. Not impossible. The system sometimes restored previous sessions after outages. Except the interface now displayed an active input channel labeled GARDNER R2 no, Elise said immediately. I didn't touch it, Malik said. Was real too connected? No. I checked the patch bay anyway. No active line. Then the level meter moved. Just a tiny twitch of green at the bottom of the scale. Everyone saw it. Tom looked around the room like someone might be hiding under a table with a microphone. The meter twitched again. Static crackled softly from the workstation speakers before Elise lunged forward and muted them. Headphones only, she snapped instinctively. The sentence hung in the air after she said it. Headphones only, Rule 5. Nobody mentioned it directly. Vivian spoke first. Can someone explain what just happened? Ground interference, Malik said too quickly. From what? Power fluctuation, crossfeed, corrupted auto-routing. Is that true? Tom asked me. Possible, I said. Possible was becoming my least favorite word. Elise unplugged the workstation entirely from the wall. Done. No accidental output. But she kept staring at the frozen level meter, even after the screen went dark. At 10:32, Nora received a call from the donor attorneys. The estate representative was driving down from Pennsylvania personally. ETA, 3 hours. And they wanted confirmation that no unauthorized playback had occurred. Vivian pinched the bridge of her nose hard enough to leave white marks. Why send someone in person? Nora answered quietly. Because they think we're going to break protocol. Malik laughed once under his breath. That's encouraging. Then Nora added the part that changed everything. The representative is Evos. The room went still again. Tom said, so your mystery person is real. Apparently, Vivian muttered. Nora looked directly at me. And they insist the tapes must remain sealed until they arrive. That's absurd, Vivian said. We're an archive, not a hostage negotiator. It's their condition. They already signed transfer. They can still challenge custodial breach. Elise removed her gloves slowly. Then we stop. I looked at the canisters. 6 reels, deteriorating, time-sensitive, possibly damaged already. And someone connected to them knew my father's name. My flaw wasn't curiosity exactly. Curiosity is healthy in archives. My flaw was the belief that if I just stayed with a thing long enough, I could prevent it from disappearing. The thought of sealing those tapes and handing control to an unknown outsider made my chest tighten. Vivian looked at me because she knew it too. If we stop now, she said carefully, and the estate withdraws the material, we lose access, I finished. Elise heard it in my voice. Daniel, we have a legal inspection window. We also have explicit instructions. From who? A donor who hides provenance. From someone trying to protect the collection or control it. That distinction matters less if we destroy it. The argument sharpened after that. Small things becoming personal. Malik siding with caution until Vivian mentioned the possibility of permanent withdrawal. Then even he hesitated, because archivists are addicts for lost things. Finally, Elise said, 1 reel. Controlled bench inspection only. Then everything sealed before Voss arrives. Nora looked horrified. Absolutely not. We document current condition, or we risk losing the collection forever. You are gambling institutional liability on paranoia. No, Elise said tiredly. On experience. Vivian looked at me. Your call, Daniel. I hated that, because I already knew what I wanted to do. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the city. Spring storms moving in from the west. The basement, lights dimmed again for half a heartbeat. I looked at the sealed transfer workstation, at the wall phone, at the canisters lined side by side like old ammunition. Then I chose the 3rd reel. The lid resisted slightly when I twisted it open. Inside, tucked beneath the leader tape, was a fresh white envelope. Fresh, bright printer paper in a room full of 80-year-old dust. My name was written on the front in black marker. Daniel Mercer, and beneath it, you should not let ELISE listen. I'll continue directly from the envelope addressed to Daniel, keeping the threat human procedural and saving the full answers for the later climax. I didn't touch the envelope at first. That mattered later. At least, I told myself it did. My hands were hovering over the open canister, both sets of gloves on, the 3rd reel sitting inside its nest of old tissue, with that clean white envelope tucked under the leader like someone had placed it there during lunch break. Not in 1928, not in 1931. Recently, Elise saw my name before I could cover it. What does it say? She asked. I read the 2nd line again, slower this time, hoping it might rearrange itself into something less ugly. You should not let ELISE listen, Malik whispered. That is so far past funny. Nora stepped forward. Nobody opens that. Vivian, who had been standing near the database terminal, crossed the lab in 3 hard steps. Photograph it first. Elise, I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were on the envelope, but her face had gone flat in that way people look when they are trying not to show they've been hit somewhere tender. I'm not listening to anything, she said. So either someone is guessing, or someone knows our staffing. That narrows it to everyone upstairs, the donor office, and whoever placed that envelope, Malik said. Helpful, Nora snapped. We documented it. Malik photographed the canister from 4 angles, then the envelope in place, then my gloved hand lifting it with ceramic tweezers. The paper gave a crisp little scrape against the real flange. Too new, too ordinary. Laser printer paper, office supply envelope, black marker. That plainness made it worse. Inside was one folded sheet. Vivian said, "Read it aloud." Elise said, "No." They stared at each other. "If it contains operational information," Vivian began. "If it targets staff by name, we don't turn it into a group performance." Tom stood by the door, one hand near his radio. "Could be a threat. We should treat it like evidence." That gave us our first attempt at solving the mess. Stop the inspection, preserve the scene, involve security properly. Sensible. Clean. Nora liked it immediately. Tom called upstairs and requested building security footage from the loading bay, the freight elevator, the basement corridor, and the AV lab entrance. The archive's basement was simple if you knew it. North End was receiving and quarantine. South End was the digitization suite. East corridor led to the public elevator and staff stairs. West corridor ran to mechanical rooms and the alley loading dock. The AV lab sat near the center, behind 2 badge doors and one old fire door that never latched unless shoved. We sealed the canister again. I placed the envelope in a polyester evidence sleeve because that was what archivists did when panic asked for a container. Tom wrote the time on a yellow sticky note, then realized that looked ridiculous and took it off. For about 10 minutes, procedure worked. Then the footage failed us. Tom came back from the security office with his jaw tight. Loading bay camera, S down from 6:02 to 6:37 this morning. Nora closed her eyes. "Of course it is." "Not tampered with," Tom said. "Water in the junction box. Facilities logged it before any of this." "What about the corridor?" Vivian asked. "Shows the trunk being moved yesterday afternoon. Shows Daniel entering this morning. Elise, Malik, Nora, me, you, no one else. Not on camera." Elise pointed toward the west side of the lab. "What about mechanical access?" Tom didn't answer fast enough. The AV lab shared a rear wall with a service chase. Behind the transfer rack was a locked gray maintenance panel nobody used except facilities. It opened into a narrow utility passage carrying pipes, network conduit, and old telephone lines toward the alley. I looked at the wall phone. Malik followed my gaze. "No," Tom said. "I'll check it." "Not alone," Elise said. "I was a transit cop for 18 years. And I preserve materials that kill themselves when humidity changes 2%. We all have resumes." And Tom, Elise, and I went. Malik stayed with Nora and Vivian in the lab, although he argued about it, until Elise told him the cameras needed him more than his pride did. The service passage was accessed through a steel door halfway down the west corridor, beside a cabinet of emergency spill kits, and a framed evacuation map sun faded to pink. Tom unlocked it with a facilities key. The air inside was hot, wet, and metallic. Pipes ran overhead. Condensation ticked into a floor drain. The passage was barely wide enough for Tom's shoulders, and the light switches were spaced too far apart, leaving dim sections where the pipes seemed to braid together. "Anyone hiding back here?" I asked. "Not comfortably," Tom said. That was when something knocked from inside the wall. 3 quick taps. Elise stopped walking. Tap, tap. It came again from behind the lab wall, right where the transfer rack would be. For one awful second, I thought of the leader warning. Do not answer. And Tom lifted his flashlight and aimed it through the pipework. A maintenance contractor in a blue coverall stared back at us from the next section of passage, holding a wrench. Jesus, Tom barked. The man flinched so hard he banged his shoulder on a pipe. His name was Keith Ransom, 49, male, a facilities contractor from Dundalk with a shaved head, a yellowed beard, and the expression of someone who had been accused of things by building staff before. He'd been replacing insulation on a steam line and tapping the pipe clamp loose. He showed us his work order on his phone with irritated hands. You people called in a leak, Keith said. Now I'm getting stalked by museum cops. Tom lowered his flashlight. You see anyone else back here? No, I heard your phone ringing through the wall, though. Thought somebody died down here. What time? Keith shrugged. After 8, before 9. I don't know. I bill in 4-hour blocks. The misdirection should have relaxed us. It didn't, because Keith also mentioned one more thing. There was a guy by the alley door when I came in, he said. Older, suit jacket. Didn't look like facilities. Tom's posture changed. You talked to him. He asked if this corridor came out near audiovisual. What did you say? Keith looked between us and realized, too late, that this mattered. I said, yeah, I mean, it does. Tom swore under his breath. That was our second attempt. Secure the building before Voss arrived. Tom radioed the front desk, ordered the alley exit locked, and told security to watch for an older man in a suit jacket. Vivian called the director. Nora called legal. Elise and I returned to the lab, moving faster than we should have through a corridor full of slick condensation and stacked boxes. By then, my head had started to hurt. Not from fear exactly, from concentration, from the fluorescent lights, from the pickle stink of acetate that seemed to cling to the back of my throat. I had skipped breakfast, and my coffee sat untouched and cold somewhere on the bench. Inside the lab, Malik had the envelope displayed under the document camera. You opened it, Elise said. Vivian told me to. Vivian didn't look apologetic. We needed to know whether it contained an immediate threat. And, I asked. Malik rotated the monitor toward us. The note was short. Daniel, your father believed recording was preservation. He was wrong. Playback is participation. Keep Elise away from Reel 4. She will recognize the woman. When Voss arrives, ask why the donor kept the 7th canister. No signature. Nora read it once and sat down slowly on the stool by the sink. There are only 6 canisters, she said. According to the accession, Vivian replied. Elise was staring at the second line. She will recognize the woman. Elise, I said. I don't know any woman on a 1920s tape. Family. My family were dairy people in Vermont. Unless one of them secretly became an experimental sound engineer, no. Her voice was clipped, but she had gone pale around the mouth. Malik scratched at the edge of his glove until it snapped. Maybe this is all personalized nonsense. Cold reading. They found staff names from the website. My father isn't on the website, I said. That shut him up. We tried to verify the 7th canister through paperwork. Nora spread the chain of custody documents across the clean bench, weighing the corners with glove boxes and a stainless ruler. The accession inventory listed 6 items. The donor photographs showed the cedar trunk open, 6 canisters visible. But in one corner of the photo, partly hidden under the trunk lid, there was a circular impression in the dust lining. Same diameter as the others. 7 had been stored there, or had been removed before transfer. Vivian looked physically ill. If the donor withheld material after signing complete transfer, then legal gets interesting, Nora said. Interesting is one word. At 11:18, the power failed. The overhead lights died. The dehumidifier wound down. The computer monitors blinked black. For half a second, the lab existed only in the gray emergency glow from the exit sign and the battery light above the eyewash station. Then, the backup circuit kicked in with a hard clunk. Malik cursed. Nora dropped the ruler. Somewhere in the walls, the old phone system clicked repeatedly, like a row of teeth. "Everyone still," Elise said. "I'm good," Malik answered. Tom's radio crackled in the corridor, unintelligible. The fume extractor had stopped. Without it, the vinegar smell thickened fast. Elise moved immediately. Canisters closed. Now we obeyed. No debate. Old acetate off gases acetic acid. In a sealed, warm room with failing ventilation, it can irritate your eyes, throat, lungs. Not instantly lethal, not dramatic, but real enough. My eyes started watering as I sealed reel 3. Malik coughed into his elbow. Elise's hands shook once as she slid reel 2 back into its container. "Humidity tent is losing control," she said. "Can we move them to cold storage?" Vivian asked. "Not through public corridors during a power event." "The cold vault has backup," Nora said. "It's on the north end," I said. "Receiving corridor through quarantine, past the freight elevator." All knew the route. Out of the lab, left into the west corridor, right at receiving, through the badge gate, into cold vault be 80 yards at most. Easy on a normal day. Not easy with restricted unstable reels, no full lighting, an unknown person possibly in the building, and a donor representative inbound. Tom reappeared at the door. "Front desk says alley exit alarm triggered during the outage." "Opened?" Vivian asked. "Maybe. System reset. They're checking." "Voss?" Nora asked. "Still not here." Lise pressed her fingers to her eyes. "We need those reels out of this room before temperature climbs." "How long?" I asked. 30 minutes before I start worrying. Less if the ventilation stays down. That became the trap. Stay in the lab and risk material damage from environmental failure, or move the collection through a compromised basement with incomplete security. Vivian made the decision. Move them. Nora objected. Elise objected to the speed. Malik objected to being assigned the equipment cart because its front left wheel wobbled badly. I objected to nothing, which Elise noticed. "You're too quiet," she said while we loaded the canisters into padded transport trays. "I'm focused." "No, you're chasing the 7th canister in your head." I didn't deny it. Her voice lowered. "Daniel, whoever wrote that note is steering you." "Maybe, not maybe. I know, you don't." That landed hard because I was tired, and because she was right, and because a part of me resented her for seeing it. We moved out at 11:32. The basement map was simple in theory and confusing in emergency light. Tom led with a flashlight. Vivian followed with Nora and the paperwork case. Malik pushed the cart, both hands tight on the rail. Elise walked beside the reels, one hand hovering to steady the trays. I brought up the rear with the evidence sleeve and a portable data drive containing the morning's photographs. The corridor smelled of wet concrete. Emergency lights buzzed overhead every 20 feet. At the receiving junction, thunder hit close enough that dust shook loose from a pipe seam. The cart wheel caught on the floor transition. One tray shifted. Elise grabbed it, but the edge of reel 4's canister clipped the cart frame and sliced through her glove into the base of her thumb. "Stop," she said sharply. Blood welled bright against the white cotton in her glove. "Damn it," Malik said. "I'm sorry. Not your fault." "It is. I hit the threshold." Malik stopped talking. I pulled the first aid kit from the side pouch. The cut wasn't deep, but it bled enough to make everyone aware of how tired our hands were. Elise rinsed with sterile water, jaw clenched, refusing to sit. I wrapped gauze around her thumb while she stared over my shoulder at reel 4. "You okay?" I asked. "No, honest." Rare for her. Tom's radio crackled again. This time we heard the front desk clearly. "Possible visitor at alley level. Gray jacket, heading west corridor." Tom turned toward the sound of footsteps. We all heard them, slow, measured, coming from the mechanical side behind us. "Cold vault," Vivian whispered. "Now." But the cold vault was ahead through the north receiving gate, and the badge reader beside it was dark. "Power outage. Electronic lock dead." Nora tried her card anyway. Nothing. "Manual key?" I asked. "In my office," she said. "Where's your office?" "Second floor." The footsteps stopped somewhere behind us. Tom raised his flashlight down the corridor. No one there. Then the wall phone inside the AV lab began ringing again, faint but unmistakable through the open doors behind us. Once, twice. The badge reader suddenly blinked red, then green. The north gate unlocked with a heavy click. Nobody had swiped a card. Malik whispered, "I really hate this building." Lise looked at the open gate, then at the dark corridor behind us, then at the canisters. We could retreat to the lab, where the ventilation was failing and the phone was ringing. We could wait in the corridor for security to sweep while the reels warmed, or we could take the unlocked gate and move deeper into the restricted storage wing. Tom said, "Go." We went. And as the gate swung shut behind us, the magnetic lock re-engaged with a dead, final thud. I'll bring the human threat and the procedural failure together here, resolve the immediate conflict, and leave the final aftermath for your conclusion. Thought for a couple of seconds, the north storage gate locked behind us, and for one stupid second, all 6 of us stared at it as if embarrassment might make it open again. Then Tom grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. He hit the emergency release. Nothing. "Manual override?" Vivian asked. "Other side," Nora said. "Why would the manual override be on the other side?" "Because this building was renovated by committees." The restricted storage wing ran north under the oldest part of the archive, where the brick walls sweated during storms, and the ceiling dropped low enough that Tom had to duck under sprinkler pipes. Cold Vault B was at the far end, past 2 compact shelving rooms and the paper conservation freezer. We had maybe 60 yards to go, maybe less. Behind us, through the locked gate and around the corner, the AV lab phone kept ringing. Faint, persistent, like it knew we could still hear it. "Move," Elise said. Her thumb had bled through the gauze. She held it elevated, but her face had gone gray at the edges. Pain did that to people. So did adrenaline wearing thin. Malik pushed the cart slowly over the uneven concrete. Every rattle from the canisters made my teeth press together. The emergency lights painted everything in dull red pulses. Shelves, pipes, the plastic-covered quarantine bins, Nora's white knuckles around the paperwork case. At the first shelving room, Tom stopped. "Someone's ahead." We heard it then. Not footsteps. A metallic scrape. A key in a lock. Cold Vault B's outer door sat at the end of the hall, pale blue under the battery light. A man stood there with his back to us, one shoulder hunched, turning a key he should not have had. Gray jacket, white hair, thin neck. Vivian said, "E. Voss." The man turned. Edwin Voss, maybe 75, male, was tall in the delicate way older men become when their joints start taking more space than muscle. His suit was wet at the shoulders from the storm. He wore no visitor badge. In one hand, he held a ring of keys. In the other, a 7th canister. My first thought was not fear. It was anger, because there it was. The missing thing, the withheld proof, the gap made metal. "You're not authorized to be back here," Nora said, and her voice came out strong enough to surprise all of us. Voss looked at the cart. "You moved them." "The lab ventilation failed," Elise said. "You opened them. We inspected them. You opened them." His eyes settled on me. "You look like him," he said. I hated that it landed. Tom stepped forward. "Sir, put the canister down and come away from the vault." Voss smiled without warmth. Security in archives is always theatrical until money arrives. Tom moved fast for a man his size. Voss moved faster than he looked. He swung the 7th canister against the wall-mounted fire alarm pull station. The plastic cover cracked. The alarm shrieked. Everything became noise. Red strobes flashed along the corridor. A mechanical voice began repeating overhead, "Attention, attention. Please proceed to the nearest exit." Then the sprinklers armed with a deep clank in the ceiling. "Dry system," Nora shouted over the alarm. "Delay before discharge." "How long?" Malik yelled. "Depends when it was last serviced." Voss backed toward the vault door. "You have less than a minute before water reaches this hall." Elise's face changed. Water would ruin the exposed paperwork, damage labels, flood boxes, soak the cart padding. The canisters were sealed, but old seams fail. Cold storage was 10 feet behind Voss and a locked door. Tom lunged. Voss threw the key ring down the hallway. It skittered under the compact shelving. "Malik," I shouted. He dropped to his knees, reaching under the shelving with one hand while still trying not to block the cartwheels. Vivian grabbed the transport tray handles. Nora clutched the accession folder under her jacket like that could save it. Voss turned to me. "Your father played reel 7 twice," he said. "First time, he thought he'd discovered a preserved interview system. Second time, he understood what people will do when they think a recording is speaking directly to them." "What did you do?" I said. He shook his head. "Not me, Gardner." The alarm screamed between us. Elise shouted, "Daniel, not now." But Voss had said my father. He had said it like a door opening. Was my father part of this? He was hired to clean copies in 1998. He made one mistake. Voss lifted the 7th canister slightly. He listened alone, then wrote back to dead woman for 6 months. "That's impossible." "No," Voss said. "It's sad. There's a difference." The first sprinkler head coughed. Not water yet. Air, dust. A hard hiss from the pipe above us. Elise shoved me with her good hand. "Keys." I ran to Malik. He was flat on his stomach, cheek against filthy concrete, one arm buried to the shoulder under the shelving. "I see them," he gasped. "Can't reach." Tom was advancing on Voss again, slower now, hands open. "Sir," Tom said, "the alarm brings the fire department. Police too. This ends badly if you keep holding that." Voss looked exhausted suddenly. "It ended badly before you were born." Then he took the 7th canister and opened it. No gloves, no pad, no care. Elise made a sound I had never heard from her, small and furious. Inside was not a full reel. It was a short roll of film sound strip wound around a cracked hub, with red wax marking the leader. Rule: if leader contains red wax mark, stop transfer and notify EVOS. Except EVOS was standing there, peeling it loose with bare fingers. You wanted to control it, I said. I wanted to bury it. Then why bring it? Because you people never stop, he snapped. You preserve rot and call it duty. You digitize harm and call it access. Gardner used suggestion, timing, and private information stolen from interview subjects. Nothing supernatural, nothing mystical, just voices cut and spliced to sound responsive. People heard what they needed to hear: confessions, dead relatives, instructions. The sprinkler pipe hissed louder. Malik yelled, "Got them." He pulled the keys free and sliced his forearm on the shelving edge doing it. Blood ran down to his wrist. He tossed the ring to Elise. She caught it badly against her injured thumb and almost dropped it, then shoved it into my hand. "Vault," she said. I ran to the blue door. Wrong key, wrong key, wrong key. Behind me, Tom grabbed for Voss. Voss twisted, slipped on the damp concrete, and fell hard against the wall. The seventh reel jumped from his hands. Its loose strip spilled across the floor in a black ribbon. "No," Elise shouted. Vivian and Nora pushed the cart toward me. The fourth key turned. The vault door opened with a suctioned groan. Cold air rolled out, dry and clean and shocking. "Cart in," I yelled. Malik staggered up, one arm bleeding, and helped Vivian shove the cart over the threshold. The front wheel jammed, again. "Lift," Elise said. We lifted. All of us except Tom, who was wrestling Voss away from the fallen strip. The cart lurched into the vault. Then water hit. Not a clean movie burst. A filthy, coughing spray from old sprinkler heads, brown at first with pipe rust, then hard and cold. It hammered the corridor, the floor, Voss, Tom, the spilled seventh strip. Nora cried out as water struck the paperwork case. Vivian slammed the vault door halfway shut to shield the cart. Elise was still outside. She had dropped to her knees beside the seventh strip. "Elise," I shouted. She didn't look up. She was gathering wet film with both hands, injured thumb leaving red smears on black acetate. "Leave it," Malik screamed. She looked up then, furious. No. Voss was on the floor, coughing, Tom's knee between his shoulder blades. "Don't save that one," Voss shouted through water. "That one is the worst." That made Elise stop. Not because she believed him, because he wanted it gone. She grabbed the strip anyway. A sprinkler stream hit the open canister and spun it across the floor. It struck my ankle hard enough to make me stumble. I caught the doorframe and felt something pull in my shoulder. Pain flashed white. Elise now. She crawled toward the vault, slipping once, catching herself with her cut hand. I reached for her. She shoved the wet strip and the cracked hub into my arms first. Of course she did. Then she came through. Vivian slammed the vault door. For a moment, we were sealed in cold darkness, with the alarm muffled outside, and 6 people breathing like they had run miles. Then the battery lights inside the vault blinked on. Cold Vault B was narrow and long, with metal racks on both sides and a central aisle, just wide enough for the cart. Our breath showed faintly. The sprinkler water on our clothes steamed into the dry air. Elise sat on the floor against a rack, face tight, hand dripping through soaked gauze. Malik clamped his forearm with a paper towel. Nora opened the paperwork case and found water had seeped through one corner. She made a sound like a person trying not to sob. Vivian slid down the wall opposite her. Everyone alive. Nobody answered immediately. Outside, through the heavy vault door, Tom's voice was faint but controlled, barking into his radio. Voss shouted once, then stopped. A second voice joined Tom's. Security, maybe, or facilities. The immediate fight was over. The damage was not. I looked down at the 7th strip in my arms. Wet, creased. Red wax smeared across the leader like a thumbprint. Elise saw it too. "Put it on blotter," she whispered. "You need medical. Blotter first." Elise looked at me, and there was so much exhaustion in her face that I finally stopped arguing. We improvised a salvage station on an empty stainless shelf. Nora sacrificed dry folder stock from the emergency kit. Malik held a flashlight with his uninjured hand. Vivian logged item numbers aloud because documentation was the only thing keeping her upright. Elise directed us in a thin, steady voice. "Do not separate fused layers. Don't flat the crease. Daniel, support the leader. No tension." Her thumb had started bleeding again. I did exactly what she said, for once. When the strip lay across the blotter, I saw writing under the smeared wax. Not on the leader. On the first few inches of soundtrack edge, scratched by hand. A name. Margaret Hart. Session 12. Elise stopped breathing for 1 second too long. "Hart," Malik said softly. Elise stared at the name. "My grandmother was Margaret Hart," she said, "but she was born in 1919. "Then she'd have been a child," Vivian said. Elise nodded once, barely. Outside the vault, the alarm cut off. The absence of it left my ears ringing. A hard knock sounded on the vault door. Tom's voice came through. "It's secure. Voss is detained. Fire department S on site." No one moved. Then Tom added, "But the corridor's flooding. We can't open this yet without water entering the vault." Vivian shut her eyes. "How long?" "Until they isolate the sprinkler zone and pump the hallway." We were safe. Trapped, but safe. Cold, injured, soaked, and locked in a vault with 6 Gardner tapes, a damaged 7th reel, and the first real proof that whoever built this thing had reached into Elise's family as well as mine. I looked at her. She looked at the scratched name. Neither of us spoke, because Voss had been right about one thing. A recording didn't have to be haunted to ruin the living. They got us out of cold vault be a little after 2 in the afternoon. By then, the corridor water had been pumped down to a shallow brown film that reflected the emergency lights in trembling strips. Fire department fans roared at the far end of the storage wing. Everything smelled like wet drywall, rust, and old paper. The first thing the paramedic said to Elise was, "You should have had stitches an hour ago." She answered, "I had priorities." He did not find that charming. They sat her on an overturned milk crate near receiving while he cleaned her thumb properly. Malik was on another crate 3 feet away getting butterfly closures across his forearm. He kept apologizing to everyone within hearing range. I pushed the cart too fast. "No," Elise said tiredly. "The floor transition was uneven. I still hit it. You also got the keys. That doesn't erase the other thing." I understood him. Archivists spend their lives trying to prevent damage measured in inches. A warped corner, a cracked spine, a water line. Start believing every mistake is permanent, because sometimes it is. Tom stood with a police officer near the loading dock doors, giving a statement. The officer looked annoyed in the special way city police do when confronted with institutional panic that isn't technically criminal enough for handcuffs. Voss sat in a folding chair nearby, wrapped in a gray emergency blanket, looking smaller now that he had stopped moving. Nobody had arrested him. That surprised Malik. He sabotaged the fire alarm. He triggered a pull station, Tom said. Legally, that's different. He broke into restricted storage. He was donor representative on file. He withheld archival material. That's not a police issue, Nora said from behind us, sounding bitter enough to dissolve metal. Nora herself looked terrible. Her hair had escaped its clip. Water stains marbled the edge of the accession folder despite all her efforts. She had spent the last hour with legal counsel and the director inside a conference room upstairs, while restoration vendors assessed the basement. Vivian came out of that meeting looking 10 years older than she had that morning. The board wants an incident summary by tonight, she said. Of course they do, Elise muttered. Vivian rubbed her eyes. And nobody is to access the Gardner materials without legal approval, outside review, and environmental stabilization. Meaning frozen bureaucracy, Nora said. Meaning chain of custody after a near disaster. Nobody argued. The tapes had been transferred into emergency cold isolation. Each canister sealed in vented archival bags with humidity packets and temporary evidence tags. Reel 7 had received its own shelf and 2 separate signatures. I signed one of them with a shaking hand, not from injury, from exhaustion finally catching up. By 4:30, the storm had moved east over the harbor. Baltimore looked washed out through the third-floor windows above the reading room. Gray streets, wet buses, pedestrians stepping around puddles with coffee cups tucked into jacket sleeves. Almost normal. That was the worst part. You could stand at the archive entrance and watch students crossing Mount Royal Avenue and convince yourself nothing meaningful had happened downstairs. I stayed anyway. Not because they needed me, because I didn't know how to leave. Conservation lab upstairs had become temporary triage for damp records from the sprinkler zone. Fans hummed. Paper towels covered tables. Someone from special collections cried quietly over a soaked donor ledger from the 1880s. Elise sat at the far bench under a task lamp, while a nurse from urgent care wrapped her hand. She had finally changed clothes into archive-branded sweatpants and a navy hoodie from the gift cabinet. The oversized sleeves made her look strangely younger. I stood in the doorway too long before she noticed. "You're limping," she said. "I twisted my ankle." "You should have said something. You were bleeding." That wasn't an answer. I sat across from her. For a while, we listened to the fans. Then she said, "Margaret Hart was my grandmother." I looked up. "She died when I was 14, Elise continued. "Lung cancer. Before that, she worked in textile mills outside Burlington. She never talked about childhood much." The tape said session 12. I know what it said. "You think Gardner recorded her?" Elise leaned back slowly. "I think Gardner recorded lots of people. Poor people. Children, factory workers. Anyone who'd sit in front of a microphone for cash during the Depression." Her voice stayed level, but she was pressing her injured thumb against the edge of the bench hard enough to whiten the knuckle. "He used personal information," I said. "Yes." Voss said suggestion. "Yes, not hypnosis. Not anything supernatural. No." She looked at me directly then. "But loneliness does most of the work for people." That stayed with me. Not because it was dramatic, because it was probably true. Around 6, the police finally interviewed me properly. Detective Sarah Kim, 39, female, from Baltimore PD Property Crimes, met me in the staff break room with a legal pad and vending machine coffee. She had the exhausted patience of someone used to listening carefully, because people often lied accidentally. I told her about the calls, the notes. Voss, my father, she wrote everything down without interruption. When I finished, she asked, "Did you ever hear the recordings?" "No, you're sure?" "Yes." "Did anyone?" "No playback occurred." That was technically true. She studied me a second longer. "You know why I'm asking?" "Because people panic around things they think are dangerous." "No," she said. "Because your donor representative told responding officers these recordings can manipulate listeners into self-harm." The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. "That sounds insane," I said. "Does it?" I thought about the notes addressed to me personally, about my father spending 6 months writing letters to someone dead, about the way every instruction around the tapes isolated listeners from each other. Playback is participation, not magic, just engineered intimacy. Kim closed the notebook. "My professional opinion. Somebody built a very convincing psychological trap around these materials. Maybe intentionally, maybe accidentally over time, but people keep feeding it." She stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Your father's name turned up in Voss's papers." My throat tightened. "What papers?" "A storage receipt. Self-storage facility outside Harrisburg. Closed in 2001 after non-payment." "What was stored there?" Kim shrugged. "Unknown. Unit was auctioned years ago. Lost again." That familiar ache opened immediately behind my ribs, irrational and childish, and impossible to shut off. After she left, I sat alone in the break room until the vending machine compressor kicked on beside me and made me jump hard enough to spill coffee on my hand. I laughed then, short, ugly, tired, because my nerves had become stupid. At 7:12 p.m., Vivian called an emergency staff meeting in the reading room. Only the core group came: me, Elise, Malik, Nora, Tom, and 2 administrators from legal. The public lights were off. Rain ticked softly against the tall windows facing Cathedral Street. Vivian stood at the front desk, holding a printed memo. "The Gardner materials are being transferred temporarily to Federal Audiovisual Conservation Storage in Culpeper pending investigation and stabilization." Malik blinked. "They're taking them. They're preserving them," Nora corrected automatically, though she sounded unhappy about it. "When?" I asked. "Tonight." That hit harder than I expected. Elise noticed. "Daniel," she said quietly. I rubbed my face. "No, I know, it's correct." And it was. Federal cold storage had better environmental controls, better security, better forensic resources. Everything in me professionally agreed with the decision. Emotionally, it felt like failure. Vivian continued. The board also approved restricted review status. No public access. No playback authorization without external ethics oversight. Tom muttered. "Didn't know recordings needed ethics committees." "Some do," Elise said. Nobody argued with that either. After the meeting broke up, Malik caught me near the elevator. "You think Voss was telling the truth?" "About what?" "That the tapes only worked because people wanted them to." I leaned against the wall. "I think Gardner figured out something ugly before everyone else did," I said. "If you give people a recording built from private details, pauses, and carefully edited responses, eventually they stop treating it like audio. They treat it like conversation." "Yeah," Malik shoved his hands into his pockets. "You ever think about how podcasts already kind of do that?" I looked at him. He shrugged awkwardly. "Sorry, wrong moment." "No," I said. maybe not. At 8:30, the federal transport team arrived. No black vans, no dramatic agents, just two audiovisual preservation specialists in cold weather gloves with insulated transit cases and clipboards. Ordinary people doing careful work. That felt appropriate somehow. We accompanied them to the basement loading bay. The floodwater had mostly been cleared. Fans still rattled in the corridors. Damp footprints marked the concrete. The 6 original canisters disappeared into padded transport containers one by one. Then, reel 7. Elise signed the final transfer line because her hand had steadied more than mine. The younger preservation specialist checked the seal number twice. "Any known chemical hazards?" he asked. Elise answered before I could. "Psychological ones." He laughed politely, assuming it was a joke. We watched the cases loaded into the truck under yellow dock lights. Rain mist drifted through the open bay door. Somewhere nearby, traffic hissed along wet pavement. Voss was gone by then, released pending further review. Old age, no violent charges, lawyers already involved. Tom said he left without saying goodbye. That bothered me more than if he'd made threats. Before the truck doors closed, the older preservation specialist handed me a sealed evidence pouch. "Found with the paperwork," he said. "Addressed to you." My stomach dropped. The pouch contained a cassette tape, not a reel. A cheap Maxell cassette from the late 90s with handwriting across the label. "Dan, do not catalog my father's handwriting." I stared at it long enough that Elise stepped closer. "What is it?" "I don't know." That was true, the specialist said. It was inside the damaged registrar folder, probably missed during intake. Probably. The truck doors shut. The transport team drove away into the rain. And suddenly it was over. No alarms. No ringing phone. No old man in hallways. Just wet concrete and fluorescent lights, and a cassette tape that weighed almost nothing in my hand. Elise looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "Don't play it tonight." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because 6 hours earlier I would have insisted immediately on digitization, condition assessment, preservation workflow. Instead, I slid the cassette back into the pouch. "You think I'm that predictable?" I asked. "Yes," she said gently. "Fair enough." We walked upstairs together. My ankle hurt. Her thumb hurt. Malik was somewhere behind us arguing with facilities about ruined equipment. Nora had already gone back to salvage paperwork because she genuinely did not know how to stop working. At the lobby doors, Elise paused. "Daniel, yeah, if your father listened to something harmful, that doesn't mean he was weak." Outside, buses moved through puddled streets. A couple stood under an awning sharing fries from a paper bag. The city kept going. I nodded once. Then she added, "But it also doesn't mean he was special." That was the more important thing. Not cursed, not chosen, just human enough to mistake attention for understanding. We stepped outside into cool air, carrying rain and diesel, and the harbor somewhere beyond downtown. I went home. 3 days later, I found myself standing in my apartment kitchen at 2 in the morning staring at the cassette tape on the table. I had not played it. I had not brought it to the archive either. It sat beside a mug of tea gone cold, sealed in its evidence pouch. Outside, tires hissed along Charles Street. Inside, the refrigerator compressor clicked on and off. Ordinary sounds. I told myself that mattered. My phone buzzed once with an email from Vivian about insurance assessments and temporary closures. Another from Nora asking for a signed incident supplement. life continuing in forms and schedules and recovery timelines. I reached for the cassette anyway, just to move it, just to put it away somewhere less visible. As I picked it up, something rattled softly inside the plastic shell. A folded piece of paper wedged behind the tape spools. I froze. Then, slowly, carefully, I set the cassette back down without opening it. The refrigerator hummed. Cars passed outside. And for a long time, I stood there in my kitchen, listening to the ordinary sounds of my apartment, trying very hard not to imagine what my father had wanted to say badly enough to hide it, where only another archivist would think to look. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming.